Chapter 920. What demonic art is that? On the dark clouds, a void reversion exclaimed with a flustered expression. A demonic art to kill. Su Zimo hollered and took a deep breath before roaring into the skies. Roar! A loud and clear dragon roar sounded, penetrating metal and cracking rocks while the world trembled. There were no outsiders here. Now that Nangong Ling and the other two had fainted, Su Zimo no longer had to conceal himself and transformed into his dragon's form, releasing a dragon roar. In the primordial era, dragons were the rulers of the 10,000 races. Any race, including humans, would feel uncontrollable fear when they heard the dragon roar from the depths of their memories and bloodline. Dragons' roars were a killing technique of dragons to begin with. Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness and infused with dragon's blood. His bloodline was even stronger than true dragons. Right now, the impact of that dragon roar on the 7 void reversions was way too great. Among them, the void reversion closest to him was caught off guard and froze on the spot. His eyes were bloodshot and his expression froze. The next moment, scarlet blood flowed out from the 7 orifices of the void reversion. This person was only at the early stage void reversion realm and had a weak physique. He could not withstand the penetrative power of the dragon roar, and was killed on the spot. His primordial spirit couldn't even escape and was shattered into pieces. Back at the 1,000 demon meet, Su Zimo was already able to suppress the territorial lords without transforming into his dragon form. All the territorial lords were the strongest mid-level fiend demons in 1,000 Demon Valley. The 7 void reversions before him were only cultivators of Hellfire Hall. How could they compare to the territorial lords who had fought their way through? Furthermore, Su Zimo had already transformed into his dragon form and released his full strength. The 7 void reversions were no match for him at all. Although the void reversions standing slightly further away were not killed by the dragon roar, their bodies shuddered and their minds were in a mess as their ears buzzed. In a flash, Su Zimo arrived before one of them instantly and poked the person's glabella with his finger. Puff! A bloody hole had appeared between his eyebrows. Before the void reversion could react, his essence spirit was stabbed to death. Even the mid-level fiendish demons of the Myriad Demon Valley could not resist Su Zimo's physical body. Those void reversions had weak physiques and were like paper in front of Su Zimo, who had transformed into a dragon. They could not withstand a single blow. Whoosh! Su Zimo's figure flashed again, and as demonic chi surged, he reached out with his thick fingers and pierced the glabellas of the other 2 void reversions. Void reversions were completely helpless against his dragon claws. In the blink of an eye, 4 void reversions were dead. Finally, the remaining 3 void reversions snapped out of their stupor and turned pale when they saw the bloody scene around them. Whoosh! An evil wind blew. A tall, scarlet figure appeared in front of the 3 of them. It stretched out a huge, ferocious hand and grabbed at the 3 of them. Kill! Among them, 2 void reversions grit their teeth and released their spirit consciousness attacks right away. At the same time, they conjured hand seals and conjured 2 gigantic balls of hellfire. The remaining void reversion turned and fled without hesitation. 2 divine sense attacks arrived in an instant. However, a bedazzling golden light shone from Su Zimo's left wrist, forming a golden light barrier with a series of mysterious runes on it. The Mingwang prayer beads were essence spirit dermic weapons. When the 2 spirit consciousness attacks collided against the golden barrier, they dissipated immediately before they could enter Su Zimo's consciousness. The 2 balls of hellfire fused together and formed a dark and cold fireball that smashed towards Su Zimo's face. Su Zimo harumphed coldly and reached out with his right hand to grab the hellfire ball. Right in front of the 2 void reversions, the hellfire ball was destroyed by Su Zimo's bare hands. As for Su Zimo's palm, it was completely unharmed. The 2 void reversions' mouths were agape with shock in their eyes, as though they had seen a ghost. That was a palm that possessed the divine phoenix bone. The hellfire could not corrode it at all. After 2 consecutive attacks failed, Su Zimo had already arrived before the 2 of them. At this distance, the 2 void reversions did not even have a chance to escape. Su Zimo reached out and slapped down on their heads. Poof! Poof! Their heads were smashed on the spot, and their essence spirits were destroyed. Raising his head, Su Zimo looked at the last void reversion who had already fled the battlefield and was about to disappear into the night. He was motionless, as though he had given up on pursuing. However, a strange change happened to his right eye. It was as though a blazing sun had been born and released a bedazzling beam of light that entered the void and pierced the void reversion's head instantly. Thump! The last void reversion died here. The beam of light dissipated. Night descended once more and peace returned to the world. In the pitch-black clouds only a tall figure was left. He was covered in scarlet scales and his scarlet hair danced. His gaze was like a peerless fiend celestial that could devour mountains and rivers and look down on the world. At that moment, not many people in the cultivation world knew that the monster incarnate of history that caused countless paragons to tremble and countless sects to fear had already arrived in the middle continent. The autumn wind was bleak and the flames of war were about to ignite. In the blink of an eye, a night passed. Dawn had just broken and the east was white. Tao Lord Scarlet Star was travel-worn and had a dark expression. He could not conceal the worry in his eyes as he arrived in front of the 100 Refinements Great Hall. When Tao Lord White Flames saw Tao Lord Scarlet Star return alone, he realized that something was amiss. However, he still went forward and asked, "How was it?" Tao Lord Scarlet Star shook his head. He had searched outside for an entire night without resting and was mentally and physically exhausted. Don't be anxious. Perhaps they're just having fun. Given their cultivation, they might not be in any danger, Tao Lord White Flames consoled. Tao Lord Scarlet Star sighed. It's too late. What? Tao Lord White Flames asked. Tao Lord Scarlet Star said, I rushed to Wind Cloud City immediately and found out that the four of them did cause quite a commotion in the city. However, they managed to rush out safely. Thereafter, I chased out of Wind Cloud City and searched along the way before finally discovering this. Tao Lord Scarlet Star took out a spirit vessel with a look of sorrow in his eyes. This is Ruxian's spirit vessel. I gave it to her as a gift when she entered the nascent soul realm. Tao Lord White Flames understood that Nangong Ling and the other three were most likely doomed. However, he still consoled. The loss of the spirit vessel might not prove anything. Perhaps the four of them managed to escape. Tao Lord Scarlet Star shook his head. There's Dharma Daojuan's aura left on the spirit vessel. Furthermore, it's from Hellfire Hall. What? Tao Lord White Flames' expression changed. Tao Lord Scarlet Star endured his grief and grit his teeth. Nangong and the others have already been captured by Hellfire Hall. Hellfire Hall left this aura behind on purpose as well. Hellfire Hall, you're declaring war. You're playing with fire. Hakia Dojin's voice sounded from the hall with a murderous aura. Tao Lord Scarlet Star said sorrowfully, Poor children. I wonder what kind of torture they'll have to endure after falling into Hellfire Hall. Tao Lord White Flames knew that Nangong Ling and the other two were personal disciples of Tao Lord Scarlet Star, and treated them as his own. Now that his three disciples were in trouble, no one could understand the pain in Tao Lord Scarlet Star's heart, and he did not know how to console him either. Right then, a sect disciple sped over with a delighted expression and shouted, Patriarch, Sect Master, Senior Brother Nangong and the others are back. Chapter 921. At that moment, Tao Lord Scarlet Star was immersed in grief and did not hear anything clearly. On the other hand, Tao Lord White Flames frowned and looked at the person, asking in a deep voice, Which Senior Brother Nangong? The sect disciple said, It's Senior Brother Nangong Ling, Senior Sister Yu Hanyun and Senior Sister Ru Xian. What? This time round Tao Lord Scarlet Star heard it clearly. Tao Lord Scarlet Star turned around and arrived before the disciple instantly. He grabbed the disciple's shoulders and asked loudly with widened eyes, Are you saying that Nangong Ling and the others are still alive and have returned? Yes, I heard from the disciples patrolling the vicinity of the sect that Senior Brother Nangong and the others are heading towards the sect. The cultivator was shocked by Tao Lord Scarlet Star's appearance and replied hurriedly. The news of Nangong Ling and the other three being captured was still a secret and was not made public. Tao Lord White Flames and Tao Lord Scarlet Star were worried that this matter would cause panic. The two of them merely instructed their disciples to pay attention to the news and whereabouts of Nangong Ling and the other three. Therefore, the cultivator did not know why the two Tao Lords were so agitated. Without thinking, Tao Lord Scarlet Star wanted to head over to welcome them. Tao Lord White Flames was the one who calmed down and grabbed him, reminding Wait, be careful of traps. Ah! Dao Lord Scarlet Star was stunned for a moment before reacting quickly. This was way too strange. Nangong Ling and the other two Jining Xinjuan were captured by the Dharma Dao Jun of Hellfire Hall. Why would they suddenly return? Dao Lord White Flames had a calm expression as he turned and asked, apart from the four of them, is there anyone else following them? I'm not sure about that. I don't think so, the sect disciple said. If there were outsiders, the senior brother who sent the message would definitely have mentioned it. Dao Lord Scarlet Star was anxious and asked hurriedly, are the three of them injured? How are they? Were they threatened? The sect disciple was sweating profusely. The message only said that senior brother Nangong and the other three are safe and sound. As for whether they were threatened or not, I really don't know. That's enough. Right then, Hakea Dojin's voice sounded in Dao Lord Scarlet Star's mind. Go and bring them back. This calamity should have been resolved. Hakea Dojin did not know how Su Zimo managed to escape from Dharma Dao Jun with Nangong Ling and the others. However, he speculated that only Su Zimo could create such a possibility. In fact, Hakea Dojin had more or less guessed it. However, he did not expect that Su Zimo did not escape from the Dharma Dao Jun. Instead, he killed the Dharma Dao Jun. Alright, I'll go now. Dao Lord Scarlet Star could not wait any longer and sped out of the sect in a flash. On a brand new spirit boat, Nangong Ling and the other two had already woken up. After more than 4 hours of travel, the spirit boat was about to arrive at 100 Refinement Sect. Little Uncle Master, what's going on? Little Uncle Master, what happened? Didn't we fall into the hands of Hellfire Hall? Little Uncle Master, where's that old fart? Along the way, ever since Nangong Ling and the other two woke up, they had gathered in front of Su Zimo and asked nonstop, wishing they could pry open his head. Even someone as calm as Yu Hanyan could not sit still. With a slightly red face, she tugged at Su Zimo's sleeves and asked softly, Uncle Master, what happened last night? Su Zimo had already transformed into his black-haired, green-robed form. He merely sat in front of the spirit boat and smiled bitterly. I don't know either. When I woke up, we were already on this spirit boat. Little Uncle Master, you're lying. I don't believe you. Ru Xian pouted with a doubtful expression. Yu Hanyan tilted her head slightly as well and looked at Su Zimo without blinking, as though she wanted to see through some secrets. For some reason, Yu Hanyan and Ru Xian felt that this matter definitely had something to do with Su Zimo. It was not as simple as he said. A woman's intuition was truly accurate. It did not make sense either. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat as he thought that he had exposed something. However, he could not explain or say anything about this. Could it be that he had displayed his might with his nascent soul cultivation and killed the Dharma Dao Jun before transforming into his half-dragon, half-human form and killing the 7 void reversions as well? This sounded even more fantastical than a fantasy. Furthermore, he did not want to expose his identity. At that thought, Su Zimo could only grit his teeth and say, it's just that my cultivation realm is higher and I woke up earlier than you guys. Yu Hanyan and Ru Xian were still doubtful and refused to believe it. Compared to the two of them, Nangong Ling was much more realistic. Nangong Ling helped Su Zimo out from the side and said, Junior sister, don't bother little Uncle Master anymore. A peerless expert should have made a move for us to avert danger. Who is that peerless expert? Why isn't he showing himself? Ru Xian pursed her lips and asked instead. This? Nangong Ling looked embarrassed and was speechless. How would he know who the peerless expert was? Turning around, Ru Xian glared at Su Zimo. Humph, little Uncle Master, don't try to hide it. You must have something to do with this. I got it. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Ru Xian's mind and she exclaimed. Everyone present was startled. Ru Xian approached Su Zimo mysteriously and said firmly, Little Uncle Master, stop hiding. You must have found that peerless expert, right? Su Zimo. After a while, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat when he saw that Ru Xian and Nangong Ling were still pestering him. Suddenly, his expression turned unfathomable. Alright, since you guys have already discovered my secret, I won't hide it anymore. Su Zimo coughed gently and said indifferently, Actually, I was the one who killed Dharma Dao Jun of Hellfire Hall, and the 7 void reversions before rescuing you guys. TSK. Ru Xian did not believe Su Zimo's words. On the other hand, Yu Hanyun frowned slightly and pondered for a long time, as though she had to ponder over every single word Su Zimo said. 100 Refinement Sect was right ahead. All of a sudden, the sound of clothes fluttering could be heard as a figure flew over at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, he had already descended on the spirit vessel. Master! Nangong Ling and the other two had escaped death. Now that they saw Tao Lord Scarlet Star, they were naturally delighted and stood up to greet him. However, right after, the three of them seemed to have thought of something and gradually reacted. All of them felt guilty and lowered their heads, not daring to speak. Initially, Tao Lord Scarlet Star's face was filled with worry. However, when he saw that Nangong Ling and the other two were alive and uninjured, his expression darkened and he was enraged. You three brats, can't you stop making me worry? Ah! After a brief silence, Tao Lord Scarlet Star roared and spat on the faces of the three of them. Su Zimo looked at Nangong Ling and the other two and shrugged, wishing them all the best. He hurriedly distanced himself from them, afraid that he would be implicated. Chapter 922. From outside the sect to the entrance of the 100 Refinements Great Hall, Nangong Ling and the other two were scolded by Tao Lord Scarlet Star the entire way. They were scolded badly and did not even dare to wipe off their faces that were covered in saliva. Without Nangong Ling and the other two pestering him, Su Zimo watched the commotion from the side happily. Naturally, Tao Lord Scarlet Star asked about the entire incident. Su Zimo pretended not to know and casually said that he was already on the spirit vessel when he woke up. Tao Lord Scarlet Star brought Su Zimo and the other three to the entrance of the 100 Refinements Great Hall before stopping to reprimand them to take a breather. Master, you must be tired too. We know our mistake. Drink some water. Wuxia was the best at pleasing Tao Lord Scarlet Star. She hurried over and produced a steaming cup of tea from somewhere before handing it over. Harumphing, Tao Lord Scarlet Star received the tea and downed it in one gulp. He said angrily, I'll teach you guys a lesson after this period of time. Nangong Ling and the other two exchanged glances, knowing that they had passed this ordeal. The three of them heaved a sigh of relief and rolled up their sleeves in unison to wipe off the saliva on their faces. It's good that you're fine. The 1,000 Crane Tea Party will be held a month later. At that time you guys will have a chance to redeem yourselves. Tao Lord White Flames chuckled and tried to smooth things over. After thinking for a moment, Tao Lord Scarlet Star turned around and looked at Su Zimo with a frown, saying in a deep voice, Junior brother, although you're young, you're their senior after all. The three of them are fooling around and you're fooling around as well. Don't you know how to stop them? Su Zimo had just taken out the heaven-slaying sword art, and was prepared to continue comprehending it when Tao Lord Scarlet Star turned around and started lecturing him. All you know is to read that stupid book blindly. What can you see? After lecturing Nangong Ling and the other two, it was clear that Tao Lord Scarlet Star was still angry and continued, as their uncle master, you have to cultivate diligently and be a role model. You can't idle around and read random books all day. Su Zimo was dumbfounded. This was the first time he had heard someone call the heaven-slaying sword art a messy book. Su Zimo knew that Tao Lord Scarlet Star was concerned about Nangong Ling and the other two. That was why he turned around to teach him a lesson and was not intentionally targeting him. Su Zimo didn't take it seriously. He smiled and didn't try to defend himself. On the other hand, Nangong Ling and the other two could not stand it anymore. Yu Hanyun quickly stood up and said, Master, you can't blame Martial Uncle for this matter. It was me who wanted to go to the Wind and Cloud Assembly. Senior Martial Brother Nangong and Junior Martial Sister Wuxia accompanied me. Martial Uncle tried his best to stop me, but I was too stubborn. It's not Junior Sister's fault. Nangong Ling also said, a month later, Junior Sister will participate in the refining competition. She is under too much pressure, so she wants to go out and relax. Furthermore, Little Uncle Master did try his best to stop us for this matter. I was the one who kept causing trouble and Little Uncle Master followed us because he was worried that we would be in danger. After what happened in Wind Cloud City, Nangong Ling watched as Su Zimo crippled Changpeng, who was ranked 15th on the phenomenon ranking with a single slash. He even suppressed Jian Wuzong, who was ranked 3rd on the phenomenon ranking, to the point that he could not even draw his sword. His impression of Su Zimo had changed drastically. At that moment he stood out to speak up for Su Zimo as well. Tao Lord Scarlet Star frowned slightly. These disciples of his had always respected their master, and had never disobeyed him. Even when he reprimanded them so viciously just now, none of them retorted at all. To think that his disciples would be unable to take it just by reprimanding Mo Ling casually. Tao Lord Scarlet Star looked at Su Zimo meaningfully and lamented internally. Seems like this junior brother of mine is quite capable. He knew the 3 disciples beside him the best. All of them were prideful people. There was no way they would accept the sudden appearance of an uncle master who was younger than them, and had a similar cultivation realm. To think that in just 2 months, his 3 disciples would start speaking up for this uncle master. Ru Xian jumped out as well and was even more direct as she said angrily, "Master, you're not allowed to talk about little uncle master. Do you know that if not for little uncle master, the 3 of us would have been bullied to death in Wind Cloud City?" At that point, Ru Xian's eyes reddened and she almost cried. Tao Lord Scarlet Star had been to Wind Cloud City before, but he only had a rough understanding of it and did not know the details. Before he could ask, Ru Xian had already sobbed and recounted the few battles in Wind Cloud City. Consecutively, he defeated 2 paragons on the phenomenon ranking, captured 2 assassins of Hidden Death Sect, and destroyed more than 10 Sword Sect cultivators with a single slash. Such a battle record was shocking to begin with. Coupled with Ru Xian's embellishment and eloquence, even Tao Lord Scarlet Star and Tao Lord White Flames were stirred and their blood boiled. Tao Lord Scarlet Star's brows gradually relaxed and he looked at Su Zimo with a much gentler gaze. Yu Hanyun took out a black stone from her storage bag and handed it over. "Master, this is the stone." Tao Lord Scarlet Star received it. A single sweep of his Dharma characteristic spirit consciousness was enough to detect it. It's indeed a lava crystal. Tao Lord Scarlet Star and Tao Lord White Flames exchanged glances and nodded. Ru Xian continued, "Although I don't know why you guys are suddenly in a hurry to gather these top-grade spirit materials, if not for little Uncle Master, this stone would have been snatched away long ago." Yes, Mo Ling did well in this matter. Given his status, Tao Lord Scarlet Star could not apologize to Su Zimo. Hence he chuckled. "Cough, as expected of my junior brother. You've truly brought honor to the sect." Nangong Ling and the other 2 finally smiled as well. Unexpectedly, Tao Lord Scarlet Star seemed to have thought of something and suddenly turned around. He glared at the 3 of them and scolded, "Uncle Master is Uncle Master. What little Uncle Master? How am I little? Look at the 3 of you. You have no manners at all. Change it in the future, do you hear me?" "Got it." Nangong Ling and the other 2 did not dare to retort and agreed weakly. Gripping the lava crystal, Tao Lord Scarlet Star turned and walked into the hall, intending to hand the stone to Hakura Dojin first. In the depths of the hall, in a spirit pool filled with immortal chi, an essence spirit that shone with red light sat upright. The moment Tao Lord Scarlet Star placed the lava crystal beside him, he heard Hakura Dojin say indifferently, "You were quite impressive earlier on, weren't you?" "Ah." When Tao Lord Scarlet Star heard Hakura Dojin's odd tone, he chuckled dryly. "Grandmaster, you must be joking. I was just teaching a junior a lesson." "Who's the junior?" Hakura Dojin asked again. "All of them." Tao Lord Scarlet Star felt his hair stand on end and his gaze flickered, losing his confidence. Hakura Dojin's essence spirit walked out of the spirit pool slowly and said coldly, "Mo Ling is my disciple. He's of the same generation as your master, Tian Xine. How dare you call him junior brother?" "Ah." Tao Lord Scarlet Star was shocked. In that case, he should address Mo Ling as Uncle Master respectfully. "How dare you teach your Uncle Master Mo Ling a lesson? Are you trying to go against your master and destroy your ancestors?" Hakura Dojin hollered again. Tao Lord Scarlet Star knelt on the ground with a thud in fright, wanting to cry but no tears came out. Yet, he did not receive a single praise when he came in to deliver a stone. Instead, he was scolded and even had an Uncle Master. Chapter 923. In front of the 100 Refinements Great Hall. Not long after Tao Lord Scarlet Star entered, he walked out dejectedly and looked up at Su Zimo with a resentful expression. Su Zimo did not know what happened in the hall, and felt his hair stand on end when Tao Lord Scarlet Star looked at him like that. Sigh. Tao Lord Scarlet Star sighed internally. At the thought of his grandmaster's reprimand, he could only come before Su Zimo obediently. Under the gazes of Nangong Ling and the other two disciples, he bowed slightly with the etiquette of a junior and took a deep breath. Greetings, little Uncle Master Scarlet Star. After saying that, Tao Lord Scarlet Star felt his cheeks burn and wanted nothing more than to find a hole to hide in. Although he did not raise his head, he could guess the expressions of Nangong Ling and the other two. Su Zimo was smart. On second thought, he guessed that Tao Lord Scarlet Star must have been taught a lesson by Hake Dojin in the hall. Su Zimo did not care much about seniority. Furthermore, he was young and had a low cultivation realm. Now that he had gained such a huge advantage, he felt embarrassed. Su Zimo hurried forward and helped Tao Lord Scarlet Star up. There's no need for that. If you don't mind, Senior, you can just call me by my name. That won't do. Tao Lord Scarlet Star shook his head. Although he was unwilling and indignant from the bottom of his heart, he and the sect valued seniority and etiquette greatly and could not break the rules. Nangong Ling and the other two were at a loss as they listened to the conversation in a daze. Why did their master have to bow to Mo Ling and address him as Uncle Master in the blink of an eye? If they were to follow seniority, wouldn't they have to address Mo Ling as Uncle Master? Master. Ruxian hurried over and could not help but ask, what's going on? Isn't Mo Ling your junior brother? Why did he suddenly become your Uncle Master? Feeling aggrieved, Tao Lord Scarlet Star glared and hollered, why do you have so many questions? Move aside. Then he called out to Ruxian and the other two and said in a deep voice, listen up, you have to change your address in the future. This is your granduncle master. Our seniority has dropped again. Nangong Ling and the other two looked at each other and cursed in their hearts. Without much hesitation, they bowed to Su Zimo and shouted, greetings, Martial Granduncle. Martial Uncle and Martial Granduncle were just names to them. They didn't care. This was because, in their hearts, they had already accepted Su Zimo. On the other hand, Tao Lord Scarlet Star stood at the side, brooding. Tao Lord Scarlet Star swept his gaze and saw that Tao Lord White Flames was about to take the opportunity to escape. He hurried forward and pulled him over. Don't run away either. We are of the same generation, so you have to call me Martial Uncle. Tao Lord Scarlet Star felt a little better after finding a companion, and had a gloating expression on his face. Tao Lord White Flames was the patriarch of 100 Refinement sect, and had a noble status. It was even harder for him to address him as Martial Uncle. Little Uncle Master. Forced by the situation, he could only brace himself and shout. Right then Ruxian came over and pretended to be confused. Uncle Master is Uncle Master. What's Little Uncle Master? How is he young? Tao Lord Scarlet Star blushed. That was what he had reprimanded Ruxian and the other two earlier on. To think that the tables would turn and Ruxian would turn around to mock them. What's wrong with being young? Tao Lord Scarlet Star straightened his neck and argued with a red face. He's only more than 100 years old and is young to begin with. There's nothing wrong with us calling him Little Uncle Master. In his heart, the word young seemed to be the last bit of dignity he could fight for. Su Zimo smiled. Seniors, there's no need for that. If there's anyone else around, you can just call me by my name. This could be considered as giving Tao Lord Scarlet Star and the other two a way out. Otherwise, as the master of a sect, he would have to bow to Jining Jinjuan, who was more than 100 years old in front of so many disciples. That was something that he could not bring himself to say. Thank you, Little Uncle Master. Tao Lord Scarlet Star smiled embarrassedly and agreed. If there's nothing else, I'll head back first. Su Zimo bade farewell and turned to leave. If he stayed here, it would only add to the awkwardness. Nangong Ling and the other two bowed and bade farewell as well. Tao Lord Scarlet Star and Tao Lord White Flame stood at the entrance of the hall and exchanged glances. What happened early in the morning was truly magical. For some reason, there was an Uncle Master between the two of them. I'm sure you guys are indignant about acknowledging this Uncle Master. Right then, Hake Dojin's voice sounded in their minds. I wouldn't dare. Tao Lord Scarlet Star shook his head hurriedly, afraid that he would be taught a lesson by Hake Dojin again. Tao Lord White Flames added, that's nothing. Since he's your disciple, according to seniority, He's our uncle master. Hake-dojin laughed. You said that you wouldn't dare. In other words, you're truly indignant. Dao Lord Scarlet Star did not say anything in tacit agreement. Hake-dojin did not reprimand him anymore. Instead he asked, do you guys think that Nangong Ling and the other two were really lucky to be able to return unscathed this time round? They bumped into some peerless expert who saved them and left without even leaving his name? Then what's going on? Dao Lord Scarlet Star was stunned for a moment before grinning. Grandmaster, are you going to say that Mo Ling, little Uncle Master, was the one who saved them? He's Jining Zhenjuan. Even if he's strong and can suppress paragons on the phenomenon ranking, can he fight against the Dharma Dao Jun? Dao Lord White Flames nodded as well, clearly not believing that Suzimo was the one who did it. This was simply a fantasy story. Hake-dojin said indifferently, although I don't know the exact situation, this matter must have something to do with Mo Ling. If there was anyone in Tianhuang mainland who understood Suzimo's abilities the best, it would be him. Hake-dojin was definitely one of them. Dao Lord Scarlet Star and Dao Lord White Flames exchanged glances. Although they did not refute, they did not think much of it. Hake-dojin continued, perhaps if the two of you know his true identity, your impression of him will change. Perhaps you'll believe me. The two Dao Lords' hearts skipped a beat. Dao Lord Scarlet Star asked, Grandmaster, who is Mo Ling's true identity? I can't say for now, Hake-dojin said in a deep voice. However, I'm guessing that given his character, it won't be long before his identity is exposed. Upon hearing Hake-dojin's words, Dao Lord Scarlet Star and Dao Lord White Flames were even more curious. What sort of identity could Jining Zhenjuan have for Hake-dojin to value him so highly? Hake-dojin sighed faintly and said meaningfully, one day, you'll realize that you've taken advantage of him by acknowledging him as your uncle master today. Ah! Dao Lord Scarlet Star and Dao Lord White Flames were even more confused. Why was it getting more and more ridiculous? Hake-dojin said, go ahead and prepare for the 1,000 Crane Tea Party in a month's time. I'm almost done preparing the spirit materials for my bone-tempering body. After the tea party, I'll prepare to reconstruct my body. Dao Lord Scarlet Star and Dao Lord White Flames acknowledged and left. Before they could go far, Hake-dojin's voice sounded once more. By the way, the book that Mo Ling was reading is not some random book. It's one of the 3 ancient sword arts, the heaven-slaying sword art. Little Huzi, you're too arrogant. Aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? Heaven-slaying sword art. Dao Lord Scarlet Star shuddered and stood alone in the wind. Chapter 924. Hellfire Hall. In the gloomy and dry hall, a cold and gloomy face was reflected under the flickering candlelight. Not long after, a Hellfire Hall cultivator strode into the hall and knelt on one knee. Cupping his fists, he said, Master, Uncle Yu and the 7 Void Reversion senior brothers have been found. They're all dead, right? The Master of Hellfire Hall said faintly, as though he was not surprised. It was already noon. If Uncle Yu and the others were not back yet, it meant that the assassination attempt had failed. However, he could not figure it out. According to the information sent by the spies of 100 Refinement Sect, Nangong Ling's group headed to Wind Cloud City without any Dharma characteristic experts following them. How did Uncle Yu fail this time round? A name appeared in the mind of the Master of Hellfire Hall, Mo Ling. He frowned. That was impossible. According to reliable sources, Mo Ling was only at the nascent soul realm and could not threaten Uncle Yu and the others. Bring the corpses up. The Hall Master of Hellfire Hall calmed himself down and said. A few Hellfire Hall cultivators carried the 8 corpses into the hall and placed them on the ground carefully before retreating slowly. The Master of Hellfire Hall walked down the platform and arrived beside the 8 corpses with a focused gaze. His lifespan is depleted? The Master of Hellfire Hall frowned. What happened to cause Uncle Yu's lifespan to be depleted and he died? This was way too strange of a death. It could not be that Uncle Yu released some method to deplete his lifespan on his own accord. The Master of Hellfire Hall swept his gaze and his pupils constricted slightly when he saw the other 7 corpses. The wounds on the 7 corpses were simple. Their glabella was either pierced or their heads were smashed. There were no additional wounds on their bodies. They died cleanly. The master of Hellfire Hall sniffed and his expression changed slightly, as though he had discovered something. Master, what's wrong? The cultivator standing in front was the #1 weapon refinement genius of Hellfire Hall, Ming Han, who was about to compete with 100 Refinement Sect for weapon refinement. There's remnant demonic chi. The master of Hellfire Hall pondered for a moment. What a domineering demonic chi! Ming Han frowned and asked, could Uncle Yu and the others have encountered an accident and were attacked by high-level fiend demons? It's possible. However, the Hellfire Hall master soon shook his head. That's not right. If they were attacked by high-level fiendish demons, those 4 juniors wouldn't have survived. Why are their corpses missing? Right then, a Hellfire Hall disciple sped over from outside and knelt on the ground. He said respectfully, Hall Master, 100 Refinement Sect spies have sent news that Nangong Ling and the other 3 have returned safely to 100 Refinement Sect. The face of the Hellfire Hall Master darkened as 2 balls of netherworld flames burned in his eyes with killing intent. The Hellfire Hall disciple lowered his head and trembled, not daring to speak. A long time later, the flames in the eyes of the Master of Hellfire Hall gradually subsided as he waved his hand. You may leave. The Hellfire Hall disciples retreated rapidly as though they had been pardoned. Master, you don't have to worry. Ming Han said proudly, the 1,000 Crane Tea Party will be in a month's time. At that time, I'll definitely defeat you Hanyan and clear the name of Hellfire Hall. Yes. The Hellfire Hall Master nodded. As long as you win this weapon refinement battle, there will be super sects that will step in for you. At that time, many factions will add fuel to the fire. In front of everyone, 100 Refinement Sects' reputation will fall, and it will definitely be removed from the 4 unorthodox groups. Don't worry, Master. Ming Han said confidently, Yu Hanyan won't be able to win. The Hellfire Hall Master smiled sinisterly and narrowed his eyes, saying coldly, 100 Refinement Sect, let's see how you're going to win this round. After this experience, Nangong Ling and the other 2 were completely silent. The 1,000 Crane Tea Party would be in a month's time. Under Tao Lord Scarlet Star's urging, the 3 of them entered seclusion. Su Zimo had some peace as well. Apart from comprehending the heaven-slaying sword art every day, he would attempt to condense an immortal Tao fire and practice the fire elemental dermic arts that Hakura Dojin imparted to him. Right now, he had already cultivated a Buddhist Tao fire. Although the Buddhist Tao fire condensed from the Scarlet Flame Heart Sutra was already extraordinary, it was still no match for top-tier dermic arts. If he could condense another Tao fire, even if he could condense 2 Samadhi Tao fires, their power would increase tremendously. Now that he had returned to the cultivation world, it was not convenient for him to reveal the methods of the demons. Therefore, it was extremely important for him to master as many fire elemental dermic arts as possible to increase his combat strength. A month passed in the blink of an eye. This day, Su Zimo sat cross-legged in his cave abode with his eyes closed. A golden flame floated beside him and spun slowly around him. His hands were naturally placed on his knees with his palms facing the sky as he conjured hand seals continuously. Failure. Reassembly. Failure again. Reassembly again. He had experienced countless failures. All of a sudden, there was a snap of his fingers. A scarlet flame appeared on Su Zimo's fingertip. Initially, it flickered as though it would be extinguished by a gust of wind. Before long, the small flame stabilized. The immortal Tao fire is done. Su Zimo was delighted when he looked at the scarlet flame. He smiled gently and flicked his fingertip gently. This cluster of crimson flames floated in front of him, circling around his body one after the other with the golden flames. This move was also a fire elemental dermic art, known as the Scarlet Flame Revolving Lantern. With the 2 balls of flames revolving around him, he could attack and defend. Any enemy that tried to approach would be burned by the flames. Little Granduncle Master, open the door. Right then there was a knock on the door. With a single thought from Su Zimo, the 2 balls of flames dissipated into the void. Thereafter, the door of the cave abode opened slowly, as though it was pulled by a pair of invisible hands. Ruxian skipped in. Following closely behind were Nangong Ling and Yu Hanyan. The 3 of them did not change much after a month. However, Yu Hanyan looked even more composed, as though she was prepared. Little granduncle master, let's go. You're the only one who can stay obediently in the cave abode. The cultivators outside can't wait any longer. Wuxia said, "The 1,000 Crane Tea Party is about to begin. Our 100 Refinement sect will set off today." When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart rippled. This day had finally arrived. After 100 years, he could finally see those old friends again. If nothing went wrong, he would be able to see Ji Chengtian and Lung Ro at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party this time round. The three of them had joined Misty Peak together and experienced too many things. There was also Xiaoning and Night Spirit. He wondered how they were doing after 100 years. Of course, there was one more person. A cold glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes before disappearing quickly. Dean. All the nascent soul paragons of the Middle Continent would gather at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party this time round. Su Zimo believed that Dean would definitely not miss this event. If he bumped into Dean at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party, he would definitely find an opportunity to kill the latter on the spot. Of course, 100 years had passed. He had grown rapidly and his combat strength had increased rapidly. Dean would definitely not remain stagnant either. Su Zimo was filled with anticipation as he muttered internally, "Dean, I believe you won't disappoint me." Chapter 925. 100 Refinement Sect. The sect cultivators participating in the 1,000 Crane Tea Party had already gathered in front of the 100 Refinement Great Hall. There were more than 1,000 of them, and almost all of them were Jining Xinjuan. Su Zimo was among them. That was the foundation of a super sect. 100 Refinement Sect was only a weapon refinement sect, and yet, there were more than 1,000 Jining Xinjuan in it. Furthermore, that was not all. One could imagine the strength of super sects with ancient legacies such as the 9 immortal sects and 7 fiend sects that focused on combat cultivation. There were less than 100 Jining Xinjuan in Misty Peak. Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings and looked at Nangong Ling and the other two beside him. He asked in a low voice, "It seems like there's only one void reversion bringing us to the Chiguramon this time round?" Following Su Zimo's gaze, he saw a void reversion standing in front of Tao Lord White Flames and Tao Lord Scarlet Star, bowing slightly as a disciple. That person nodded from time to time with a respectful expression as he listened to the instructions of the two Tao Lords. When Wuxia heard that, she volunteered to explain to Su Zimo. The 1,000 Crane Tea Party was a grand cultivation event held by the Chiguramon that happened once every 1,000 years. It was a rare opportunity. As the name suggested, the theme of the 1,000 Crane Tea Party was to drink tea. This tea was not ordinary tea of the mortal world. It was mystic tea, and Jining Xinjuan would benefit his essence spirit greatly after drinking it. Therefore, most of the people who attended the 1,000 Crane Tea Party were Jining Xinjuan. Of course, the various major sects and factions might send 1 or 2 void reversions to accompany them to the tea party. However, no matter what, the paragons of the nascent soul realm were definitely the main characters of this tea party. Wuxia said, "That's why it's useless even if so many void reversions go. I heard that every tea party is personally organized by the patriarch of the Chiguramon. Dharma characteristic experts can't go wrong." Su Zimo nodded as he understood. Wuxia pointed to the void reversion not far away. "That's Dao Bing Yuding, the eldest disciple of the patriarch. He's at the perfected void reversion realm, and his weapon refinement skills and combat strength are rather impressive." Nangong Ling also said, "Senior brother Yuding is calm and steady. It seems that he should be the one leading the team this time." As he spoke, the two Tao Lords, White Blaze and Crimson Star, seemed to have finished their instructions. Taoist Yuding turned around and walked towards Su Zimo and the other three. Taoist Yuding was more than 3,000 years old and was at his peak. He had a calm bearing and came before Su Zimo. He bowed slightly and said in a deep voice, "Greetings, Uncle Master. I'm still young, so you don't have to be so courteous." Su Zimo helped Taoist Yuding up gently and nodded with a smile. Although Taoist Yuding was stern, he was polite and sent a voice transmission, in name, "I'll lead the team for this trip at any time. However, Master and Sect Master just now instructed me that if anything happens, I'll let Uncle Master make the decision. I'm not from the Middle Continent and I've never been to the Chiguramon. There are many things that I don't know. You can lead the team." It was not that Su Zimo was being polite. but that he truly did not know anything about the Thousand Crane Tea Party. When he heard Su Zimo say that, Taoist Yuding did not look down on him at all. He bowed once more before turning to the group of cultivators. Taoist Yuding pressed his hands against the air without saying a word. The noisy Jining Jinjuan below quickly quietened down. I hope that everyone will take care of each other on this trip to the Chiguramon and abide by the rules. Don't embarrass the sect. Also, we have a weapon refinement competition with Hellfire Hall. At that time, everyone, please cheer for junior sister Lu. Understood. Everyone agreed to it loudly. Let's go. Taoist Yuding waved his hand and summoned a gigantic spirit vessel from his storage bag. It floated in front of the main hall and he was the first to jump on. Many Jining Jinjuan followed closely behind. Su Zimo and the other three followed as well. The spirit vessel tore through the air and disappeared above 100 Refinement Sect before long, turning into a black that gradually disappeared into the distance. Tao Lord White Flames and Tao Lord Scarlet Star stood with their hands behind their backs as they looked at the spirit vessel that was gradually disappearing. Both of them had deep worry on their faces. Tao Lord Scarlet Star murmured softly, I have a feeling that something big is going to happen at the Thousand Crane Tea Party this time round. I hope that Han Yan can win this round. Sigh, I've been feeling uneasy recently as well. Tao Lord White Flame shook his head slightly. Everyone is watching this tea party. If Han Yan loses, our 100 Refinement Sect's reputation will definitely take a huge hit. Tao Lord White Flame said worriedly, I'm just worried that if we lose this weapon refinement competition, someone will add fuel to the fire and remove us from the 4 unorthodox groups at this tea party. At that time, even if Grandmaster Extreme Fire were to reforge his body and reappear, it would be too late. Right then, Hakka Dojin's voice sounded from the main hall, calm and composed. Both of you come in. The two Tao Lords hurriedly entered the hall. There are a few letters here. Deliver them personally to these people without any mistakes. Tao Lord Scarlet Star and Tao Lord White Flames received the letters and scanned them. When they saw the Tao titles on them, they were shocked. You guys can go on, Hakka Dojin said indifferently. It's time to tell some old friends that I, Extreme Fire, am back. They set off early in the morning and took almost half a day. Everyone from 100 Refinement Sect had already entered the Chiguramon region on their spirit vessel. Before they truly arrived at the Chiguramon, they could already see immortal cranes circling in midair, crying softly and welcoming guests from afar warmly. When he saw those cranes, Su Zimo could not help but think of the old immortal crane in Ching Ching at Misty Peak and was in a daze. Yu Hanyan noticed this and smiled. Granduncle Master, these cranes are actually not real demon beasts. Oh, Su Zimo looked surprised. Yu Hanyan waved her hand gently, and an immortal crane cried softly before landing beside her. It extended its slender beak and rubbed Yu Hanyan's arm gently in an extremely obedient manner. Yu Hanyan patted the crane's head gently. The red-crowned crane actually disappeared and turned into a talisman that slowly floated down. Thereafter, Lu Hanyan tossed the talisman into the sky. With a shake of its body, the talisman transformed back into an immortal crane and flew away. The change in the talisman was truly magical. Su Zimo could not help but exclaim. As expected of the Chiguramon, after galloping for a while, everyone could see the entrance of Chiguramon. Who's in front? Please show your sect badge. 2 Chiguramon disciples leaped forward and bowed slightly, stopping the spirit vessel of 100 Refinement Sect. Naturally, Dao Bing Yuding was the one to negotiate. 100 Refinement Sect and Chiguramon were both part of the 4 unorthodox groups, and were extremely familiar with each other. This was just a simple formality. Su Zimo noticed that the 2 Chiguramon disciples who were welcoming the guests were both women. They were otherworldly and beautiful. Ruxian giggled. Granduncle Master, most of the cultivators of Chiguramon are beauties. You have to seize the opportunity. I heard that Fairy Lung Ro of Chiguramon is a peerless beauty. She's cold like ice and doesn't have any mortal aura on her. She's like a fairy that descended from the Moon Palace. Nangong Ling said, I wonder if I'll be lucky enough to catch a glimpse of her beauty. Although Yu Hanyan had a tranquil personality and stood aloof from worldly affairs, she could not help but harumph when she heard that. Nangong Ling shuddered in fear. Su Zimo was in a good mood when he thought about how he was about to meet an old friend. He patted the other party's shoulder and said half-jokingly, "Good luck." Chapter 926. As Dao Bing Yuding entered the Chigaraman, he looked over and saw a lush mountain range surrounded by green water and lush vegetation. A few thousand-foot waterfalls fell and water splashed everywhere, rumbling as a faint mist rose. The mist rose densely like an immortal realm. The sect of 100 Refinement sect gave off an ancient metallic feeling. As for the Chigaraman, it was more like an ethereal immortal palace, a pure land of the mortal realm. Su Zimo's gaze shifted and he saw an ancient tree rising from the ground in a spacious courtyard. It was upright and had lush leaves. Its crown was lush and it emitted a refreshing fragrance. Even though it was 1,000 feet away, he could still smell a faint fragrance. The fragrance was refreshing and everyone from 100 Refinement sect was shocked. It was as though their essence spirits had condensed a little in an instant. If he was not wrong, this should be the legendary mystic tea tree that was born in the primordial era. It's indeed magical to see it in person. Su Zimo nodded gently. If the fragrance of the tea tree from afar already had such an effect, the benefits would be even more obvious if he were to drink a cup of mystic tea. After absorbing the massive life essence of the 1,000-year blood sea, Su Zimo's cultivation realm had already reached the peak of late-stage nascent soul. After a few more battles and 3 months of cultivation, he was only a single opportunity away from breaking through to perfected nascent soul. If he could drink a cup of mystic tea, there was a high chance that he would be able to break through. Right then, Wuxia said, "There are only so many tea leaves and mystic tea is limited. Not every nascent soul paragon has the chance to drink a cup. Furthermore, little granduncle master, look." Su Zimo focused his gaze along Wuxia's finger. Wuxia said, "The quality of the tea leaves of this mystic tea tree are different. The tea leaves at the tip of the tree are the most tender and the effect of condensing one's essence spirit is shocking. It's also known as supreme-grade mystic tea." True enough. There were 5 leaves at the top of the mystic tea tree. They were emerald green and crystalline, like the most beautiful treasures in the world. Wuxia continued, however, there are only a few cups of supreme-grade mystic tea, and the production is extremely low. Jining Zhenjuan, who is qualified to drink this tea, is a genius among geniuses. Not only was this a great opportunity, it was also a supreme honor. Being able to drink a cup of supreme-grade mystic tea was equivalent to being in the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking. Yu Hanyan smiled. Mystic tea tree. Supreme-grade mystic tea can only be imagined. It can only be in dreams. Nangongling whispered, "Little Uncle Master, don't worry. With your strength, you'll definitely have a chance to get a cup of mystic tea in this 1,000-crane tea party." I'll give you zheng is? Zheng mystic tea is zheng, mystic zheng cultivators zheng, and phenomenon mystic tea. Ever since the Battle of Wind Cloud City, Nangongling's attitude towards Su Zimo had changed drastically. Now she was even offering the mystic tea tree. Su Zimo burst into laughter and waved it off, teasing, "There's no need for that. You can give it to your junior sister Han Yan." Heh. When she heard that, Nangongling blushed and rubbed her hands in embarrassment, as though Su Zimo had seen through her thoughts. "Granduncle Master." Yu Hanyan blushed as well and spat softly. "Look, Snowdrift Valley is here." Right then, a cultivator at the side exclaimed, "TSK TSK. They're all beauties. What a feast for the eyes." Some cultivators were lustful and almost drooled. "I heard that perfected Lord Lingbai of Snowdrift Valley is here. I heard that he's ranked 20th on the phenomenon ranking, and is one of the few male cultivators in Snowdrift Valley. That's the one who's surrounded by a bunch of women from Snowdrift Valley. How fortunate. What's there to see about men? I heard that the leader of Snowdrift Valley this time round is Fairy Luo Shui. She's a famous beauty of the Middle Continent." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat when he heard the words Fairy Luo Shui. In the ancient battlefield 100 years ago, the Jining Zhenjuan of Snowdrift Valley was none other than Fairy Luo Shui. She was also one of the few Jining Zhenjuan that survived among the 13 of them back then. Su Zimo looked over. Snowdrift Valley drove a gigantic frost spirit vessel over slowly with a chilling aura. The person in the lead was dressed in fluttering white robes and her black hair fluttered as she stood on the bow of the vessel. She was pure and graceful. It was none other than Fairy Luoxue from 100 years ago. Back in Myriad Phenomenon City, Fairy Luoxue had helped Su Zimo. Furthermore, she did not choose to escape against the massacre of the Rakshasa and Protoss. Instead, she stayed behind to fight against the two foreign races. Although Su Zimo was not too familiar with Fairy Luoxue, he had a good impression of her. After 100 years, Fairy Luoxue had already cultivated to the Void Reversion realm. Although she was severely injured in the battle in Myriad Phenomenon City, she made use of the opportunity to break through to the Void Reversion realm and became the youngest Void Reversion in the sect. Many cultivators in the surroundings exclaimed when they saw Fairy Luoxue's appearance. Gazes gathered one after another. Su Zimo was inconspicuous among the 100 Refinement sect cultivators, and naturally did not attract Fairy Luoxue's attention. Apart from Snowdrift Valley 100 Refinement sect, in this short period of time, many sects and factions arrived at Chigurman. Su Zimo saw a few upper sects of the cultivation world alone. There were a total of 108 upper sects in Tianhuang mainland. There were only 10 in the north region and dozens in the middle continent. They were the most prosperous. If nothing went wrong, these upper sects would send their perfected lords for the 1,000 Crane Tea Party this time round. Have you heard? The 1,000 Crane Tea Party this time round is the focus of everyone's attention, and is known as the largest cultivation event in the past 1,000 years. There are a few major events that happened. Isn't the biggest event the weapon refinement battle between 100 Refinement Sect and Hellfire Hall? What else is there? You're way too uninformed. A cultivator said mysteriously, I heard that a month ago, there were a few huge battles in Wind Cloud City. Changpeng was crippled and Jian Wuzong was beaten so badly that he could not even pull out his startling dermic sword. Not only did he lose his sword, he lost his face as well. Furthermore, both of those paragons were defeated by the same person. Ah! Which paragon is so strong? Could it be Yi Tiancheng? It's a Jining Xinjuan from 100 Refinement sect. Is that true? That's impossible, right? When did such a ferocious person appear in 100 Refinement sect? Why haven't I heard of him before? Many cultivators were discussing this matter as well, and looked towards 100 Refinement sect. Su Zimo had a calm expression and looked straight ahead. I heard that Heavenly Dipper sect and Sword sect were enraged when they heard this. This time round they sent their nascent soul paragons here to regain their dignity. There will definitely be a fierce battle at this tea party. Even Jian Wuzong was defeated. Who else is there in Sword sect's nascent soul realm? You don't know about that, right? Have you heard of the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago? I've heard a little about it. Rumor has it that some sort of catastrophe happened during the fight for the phenomenon ranking, and more than half of the paragons on the phenomenon ranking died. Yes, a successor of Sword sect who was in the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago has appeared. His name is Hang Qiuyu. After that catastrophe, his cultivation improved and it's said that he's even stronger than Jian Wuzong. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat when he heard that name. It was another old friend. Chapter 927. In the elementary ancient battlefield, Hang Qiuyu was defeated by Su Zimo. On the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago, Hang Qiuyu was no match for Du Gujian and was ranked 8th. The gap between him and Su Zimo was even greater. However, the Heavens Chosen who survived that calamity would experience an unimaginable transformation. It was the same for Hang Qiuyu. Jian Wuzong was suppressed so badly by Su Zimo that Sword sect dared to send Hang Qiuyu out because they were confident in him. However, neither Sword sect nor Hang Qiuyu realized who they were about to challenge. There's also perfected Lord Penglan of Heavenly Dipper sect. He's out as well. Penglan? That sounds familiar. He was the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago. It's said that he was half a step into the void reversion realm, and no one knows his current strength. Fufu, that Jining Xinjuan of 100 Refinement sect is in trouble now. That's normal. 100 Refinement sect is about to be removed from the 4 unorthodox groups. Who would care about them? Nangong Ling and the other 2 had been secretly looking at Su Zimo worriedly. The people that the surrounding cultivators were discussing were all experts who had been famous for a long time. Even the number one of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago was out. The three of them were worried for Suzimo. What shocked the three of them was that Suzimo's expression did not change at all when he heard those discussions. His eyes were like an ancient well without any ripples. Hang Qiuyu and the number one of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago did not seem to be able to stir his emotions. Nangong Ling lamented internally, "Little Uncle Master is too young and probably hasn't heard of these experts. Sigh, he's a newborn calf." Blinking her huge eyes, Ruxian muttered internally, "Is Little Uncle Master a little thick-skinned? He's not even reacting?" Under the lead of the female Chiguramon cultivators, the cultivators of the various major sects and those of 100 Refinement sect headed to the resting area. Along the way, many cultivators were still discussing excitedly. "What you guys are talking about isn't the most important thing." At this moment, a cultivator pretended to be profound and said, "Then tell me, what else do you want?" Someone quickly asked. The cultivator kept them in suspense and coughed lightly before saying slowly, "I heard that Hunyuan sect and Chiguramon are going to have a marriage alliance." "Ah, who's with who?" "Of course it's Yi Tianqing and Fairy Lung Ro. I heard that Yi Tianqing will propose marriage in public." "Aya!" Sighs and sighs could be heard all around, followed by the sound of fists and feet stamping. Suzimo frowned and turned to ask, "Who is this Yi Tianqing? Why does his name sound so familiar?" Nangong Ling and the other two looked at Suzimo as if they were looking at a monster. Ruxian said, "Little Granduncle Master, what's with your memory? He's the champion of the phenomenon ranking this time, the one who created the unprecedented Jindan phenomenon. Why don't you remember him?" "Oh, is that so?" Suzimo remarked casually, "No wonder. He sounds familiar." Nangong Ling and the other two were speechless. The influence of the phenomenon ranking was immense. Notwithstanding the number one of the phenomenon ranking, all the cultivators present could recite the name of any cultivator on the phenomenon ranking casually. In fact, many cultivators even remembered the names of the phenomenon ranking for the past 10 batches by heart. Furthermore, Yi Tianqing was the number one of the Jindan phenomenon ranking that just ended. However, the three of them did not know that the phenomenon ranking and nascent soul paragons were nothing to Suzimo, and he could not be bothered to remember them either. The only person he was interested in was Di-in. When he saw that Nangong Ling and the other two were still staring at him with strange gazes, Suzimo smiled. "There are so many paragons, it's normal for you not to remember them. But Yi Tianqing is different." Ruxian said, "He's truly strong. He ascended myriad phenomenon peak and suppressed those of the same cultivation realm, creating unprecedented Jindan phenomenons. Little Granduncle Master, you haven't seen him fight, so I'm afraid you can't sense how strong he is." Nangong Ling nodded as well. "Although the number two of the phenomenon ranking is only a single rank away from him, I feel that their combat strength is definitely a major level apart." Yu Hanyun said, "I'm afraid only Yi Tianqing is worthy of Fairy Lung Ro." Suzimo was silent. If Lung Ro could find a Dao companion she liked, Suzimo would be truly happy for her. However, for some reason, Suzimo felt that there was something strange about this matter. The number one of the phenomenon ranking and Fairy Lung Ro, the two of them can be considered as a match made in heaven, a golden couple. A cultivator at the side lamented. The person who spoke first sneered, "I don't think so." A group of people hurried over and asked, "Why? Is there any inside story?" That person looked around and whispered, "I heard from the grapevine that Fairy Lung Ro did not agree to this marriage alliance at all. It was the Chiguramon patriarch, her master, who agreed to it on his own accord." Suzimo frowned. "What's wrong with that? The years of cultivation are long and boring. It's not impossible for two people to fall in love over time." Someone pouted indifferently. "Tisk," that cultivator sneered, "what do you know? I heard that there's a huge conspiracy behind Yi Tianqing becoming Dao companions with Fairy Lung Ro." "What conspiracy?" everyone asked. "Don't forget that Yi Tianqing is Di-in's junior brother, and the two of them are known as the Chaos Essence twin paragons. As for Di-in, he was a mortal enemy of the number one of the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago." The cultivator continued, "As for that Zimo or something, he should have died prematurely. However, a few of his close friends are still alive and they're good friends with Fairy Lungro as well. The cultivator didn't continue speaking, but the other cultivators all revealed contemplative looks. Su Zimo's expression gradually turned cold. I've got it. Suddenly, Nangong Ling said. Dean once declared that he wanted to kill those people but failed. Later on, the successor of Tomb Sect and Puppet Sect hid in their sects and refused to show themselves. As such, Dean did not have a chance to attack either. This time round, the marriage alliance between Yi Tianqing and Fairy Lungro is to force those people to appear. Yu Hanyan nodded as well. I reckon that Yi Tianqing wants to help his senior brother get rid of them after they appear. In that case, Fairy Lungro is way too pitiful. Ru Xian sighed and said indignantly, it's all that Zimo's fault. Chapter 928. Ru Xian was enraged when she heard that and could not help but shout, hey! What nonsense are you guys spouting? Our 100 Refinement sect is still one of the 4 unorthodox groups. Since when was it removed? The cultivators who were discussing were from the Middle Continent's upper sect, Tyrant Emperor Mountain. When a Jining Zhenjuan of Tyrant Emperor Mountain heard that, he said eccentrically, "IO 100 Refinement sect sure is impressive. You can't even talk about it. Even the 9 immortal sects aren't that aggressive, right?" You. Ru Xian clenched her fists in anger and gritted her teeth. You were the one who started the rumors first. Dao Bing Yuding at the front leaped up and arrived between the two sections. With a calm expression, he looked at the cultivators of Tyrant Emperor Mountain and said slowly, right now, 100 Refinement sect is still one of the 4 unorthodox groups and no one is allowed to slander it. Furthermore, even if 100 Refinement sect is removed from the 4 unorthodox groups, we still have a stronger foundation than Tyrant Emperor Mountain. The leader of Tyrant Emperor Mountain was also a void reversion. That person seemed to be rather wary of Dao Bing Yuding. Turning around, he shook his head and gestured for his sect's cultivators to stop discussing. Dao Bing Yuding turned and left. A Jining Zhenjuan of Tyrant Emperor Mountain sneered and muttered softly, let's see how long more 100 Refinement sect can be arrogant. Right then, Su Zimo's gaze shifted and landed in front of a courtyard not far away. There were many people gathered around and 2 female Chiguramon cultivators stood in front of the door, seemingly guarding the courtyard. At the door, a white-robed man was bowing with a sincere expression to the 2 female Chiguramon cultivators. When he saw the white-robed man, the coldness in Su Zimo's eyes dissipated and turned gentle as he revealed a smile that he had not seen for a long time. I'll go take a look over there. You guys follow everyone back first. Su Zimo pointed to the courtyard and said to Nangong Ling and the other 2. I'll go too. Seeing that there was a commotion over there, Ru Xian decided to take a look and relieve her frustration. Daoist Yuding turned around. When he saw that it was Su Zimo who had made the decision, he did not stop them. He only nodded and said, be careful. Su Zimo nodded and smiled. Leaping off the spirit boat, he sped towards the courtyard. The few Jining Zhenjuan from the Tyrant Emperor Mountain looked at each other, and quietly left the sect's team, secretly following them. The white-robed man was none other than Ji Chongtian, who had joined Elixir Yang sect and was originally a disciple of Misty Peak. Fellow Taoists, I'll have to trouble you to go in and inform them. I'll be eternally grateful. Before he arrived, Su Zimo heard Ji Chongtian's voice. A female Chiguramon cultivator guarding the courtyard shook her head and said, you can leave. Senior Sister Lung Ro won't see you. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. In that case, Lung Ro was staying in this courtyard. Ji Chongtian refused to give up and bowed again, saying sincerely, fellow Taoists, just say that Ji Chongtian of Elixir Yang sect requests an audience. Fairy Lung Ro will definitely agree to meet you. Another female Chiguramon cultivator said indifferently, I advise you to give up. Senior Sister Lung Ro won't see anyone before the 1,000 Crane Tea Party. Fairy Lung Ro is beautiful and peerless. She's not someone you can meet just because you want to. Fufu, countless paragons come to seek an audience with Fairy Lung Ro every day. Who are you, Jichengtan? How fresh. Yesterday, perfected Lord Fengxing of Zephyr Thunder Palace, who is ranked 7th on the phenomenon ranking, came and was not summoned by Fairy Lung Ro. Who do you think you are, Ji Chengtian? Many cultivators who were watching the commotion crossed their arms and sneered with nasty words. Ji Chengtian's expression was terrible as he glared at the cultivators and said in a deep voice, "I, Ji Chengtian, am not a famous paragon. However, I'm best friends with Lung Ro. How can others compare to me?" "Oh, you're even getting cocky now." A cultivator from Five Elements sect mocked. "What's there to be cocky about when you're about to die? Do you think you'll be able to return alive after attending the 1,000 Crane Tea Party this time round?" Five Elements sect was also one of the upper sects of the Middle Continent. Another person said, "I advise you to scram back to Elixir Yang sect right now. You might still make it. After that, hide like a turtle for the rest of your life and don't come out. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep your head." Ha ha ha. Many cultivators burst into laughter. Ji Chengtian grit his teeth and said nothing, clenching his fists and trembling slightly. Dozens of years ago, he was severely injured by Diin and narrowly escaped death. Thereafter, he stayed in the sect and never came out. Now that someone was making fun of him, he had nothing to say. However, he could not ignore the marriage alliance between Lung Ro and Yi Tiancheng. He wanted to ask Lung Ro about her intentions. If Lung Ro was willing to do this, he would naturally give his heartfelt blessings. If Lung Ro was forced by someone, he had to stand out no matter what, even if it meant risking his life. "They're just a bunch of mad dogs barking. Don't bother, fellow Taoist." Not far away, a green-robed man walked over with a man and two women behind him. The green-robed man had a rough expression but his eyes were clear. He looked at Ji Chengtian and cupped his fists slightly, nodding with a smile. For some reason, Ji Chengtian felt that this person's gaze and smile were heartwarming. Ji Chengtian returned the greeting with cupped fists and forced a smile. "Thank you for your consolation, fellow Taoist. Who are you? Who are you calling a mad dog?" "So, it's a cultivator of 100 Refinement sect." A Jining Zhenjuan of 5 Elements sect sneered. 100 Refinement sect is about to be removed from the 4 unorthodox groups, and you're still in the mood to meddle in other people's business. Before Su Zimo could say anything, Ru Xian could not help but retort, "We're calling a mad dog. Whoever responds is the one." "Fufu, little girl, you were very arrogant earlier on, weren't you?" Right then, a mocking laughter sounded from behind Su Zimo's group of 4. A few cultivators of Tyrant Emperor Mountain walked over. The leader had a strong physique and was already at perfected nascent soul. He glared at Su Zimo's group of 4 with a ferocious expression. "Yue, this is Chiguramon. What are you trying to do?" Nangong Ling's figure flashed and she stood in front of Ru Xian warily. Tyrant Emperor Mountain's Yue was also a nascent soul paragon, and was ranked on the phenomenon ranking 200 years ago. Although his ranking was not high, he had cultivated for a long time and his cultivation realm was higher than Nangong Ling's. His combat strength was not to be underestimated. Yue clenched his fists and twisted his neck, letting out cracking sounds as he laughed sinisterly. "Just now, I'll let you off because I'm wary of Dao being Yuding of 100 Refinement sect. Now since you came out on your own, don't blame me for teaching you a lesson." Both sides were about to fight at the slightest disagreement. The female Chiguramon cultivators in front of the courtyard had no intention of stopping them either. With the gathering of paragons, conflict was inevitable. As long as both sides did not cause too much of a commotion and fought to the death, they would basically watch from the sidelines. Su Zimo was expressionless. 100 Refinement sect is already at this stage. Why are all these clowns and scoundrels trying to step on us? Ha 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 ha. Yue grinned and laughed. "It's good that you know. 100 Refinement sect is finished. I want to bully you." "Very good." Su Zimo nodded and turned to walk towards Yue, saying indifferently, "Since that's the case, don't blame me." Chapter 929. To be fair, Nangong Ling and the other two did not dare to take the initiative to attack under such circumstances. They were even more wary against Yue, a nascent soul who had made a name for himself a long time ago. However, who was Su Zimo? He was once the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, a monster incarnate of history that caused many paragons to tremble and all the super sects to be wary of. A few decades ago, Dean hunted down his close friend. Now Di Yin's junior brother came to Chiguramon to force a marriage. All of this enraged Su Zimo. Although he did not join 100 Refinement sect, as a disciple of Hake Dojin, there was no way he could watch as someone trampled on 100 Refinement sect. When Yue saw Su Zimo walk over and the distance between them closed, his eyes could not help but reveal a hint of cruelty. As an upper sect of the Middle Continent, Tyrant Emperor Mountain specialized in body tempering the most. The legacy cultivation technique of Tyrant Emperor Mountain, the Heaven and Earth Tyrant Emperor technique, was the foundation of the sect. Although it could not compare to Glass Palace's Glass Heart Sutra, Diamond Monastery's Diamond Body was still a top cultivation technique in Tianhuang mainland with a shocking physique and strong physique. In Yue's opinion, Su Zimo was courting death by approaching him and closing the distance. Yue laughed sinisterly and said coldly, "Fighting is not allowed at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. However, I can cripple you." The moment he said that, Yue's eyes widened and his blood chi burst forth. His glabella shone and dermic powers surged. Tyrant Emperor's finger. Yue hollered and raised his arm, extending his index finger. His chi and blood surged and his dermic powers condensed. Under countless gazes, this finger became incomparably thick and solid, like a fine steel rod. Swoosh! The finger tore through the air and pierced towards Su Zimo's face with a terrifying aura. Tyrant Emperor's finger. The top dermic art of the Heaven and Earth Tyrant Emperor technique. Its might is shocking. Yue is even more terrifying than 50 years ago. Yue is truly a ruthless person. He has no intention of testing the waters the moment he attacked. His blood chi and dermic powers were released at the same time. The power of that dermic art has already reached its limits. Su Zimo's expression didn't change. He didn't even stop walking. Seeing that the finger was right in front of his eyes, he raised his palm. Without releasing his blood chi or dermic powers, he gripped the finger in his palm casually. Yue's expression changed. His tyrannical emperor's finger could not pierce any further. Not only was he unable to stab down, but it was also too late for Yue to withdraw his tyrant's finger. Break. Su Zimo's expression was cold. With a shout, he exerted force in his palm and bent it down. Crack. The ear-piercing sound of bones breaking could be heard. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Yue's fingers were broken by Su Zimo. His broken bones were exposed, and his flesh and blood were stuck to them. It was a ghastly sight. Ah! Yue's eyes widened. After pausing for a moment, he let out a hysterical scream. The blood drained from his face, and in the blink of an eye, cold sweat flowed down his face. The Heaven and Earth Tyrannical Emperor technique and Tyrannical Emperor's finger were nothing against Su Zimo. Su Zimo strode forward and pressed his palm gently against Yue's chest. Crack! Instantly, Yue's chest caved in and his clothes were torn. A gigantic palm print appeared on his chest and his flesh exploded. Yue spat out a mouthful of blood and his eyes dimmed. He fell backward and crashed heavily onto the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. Even though he was on the ground, his body was still convulsing and the sound of bones cracking could be heard from within. The crowd was shocked. To think that a nascent soul expert Yue would be crippled after a single exchange. His essence spirit was not destroyed and he survived. However, even if his body was nurtured well, he would most likely suffer from injuries that would be difficult to recover from. Su Zimo's palm strike was merely pressed against Yue's chest. However, that palm strike contained multiple tidal forces and a vast power surged. Wave after wave, they surged into Yue's body and shattered most of his bones. As Yue had said, Chiguramon did not allow fights to the death. However, Su Zimo crippled Yue the moment he attacked. Everyone was secretly speechless. Just now they were lamenting that Yue was ruthless. To think that they would meet someone even more ruthless. Initially, some of the cultivators who wanted to take advantage of 100 Refinement sect's decline in reputation to add insult to injury hesitated. The remaining cultivators of Tyrant Emperor Mountain looked at Su Zimo with fear in their eyes. They cowered and did not dare to advance. Just you wait. Finally, a Jining Jinjuan of Tyrant Emperor Mountain stood out and said weakly, "Let's wait and see." Finished speaking, everyone from Tyrant Emperor Mountain helped Yue, who was screaming miserably, up and dashed away as if they were fleeing. Who else wants to step on 100 Refinement Sect's head? Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings with a sharp gaze that was cold and intimidating. The cultivators present exchanged glances and felt their courage weaken. Instinctively, they lowered their heads and avoided Su Zimo's gaze. There were at least hundreds of Jining Zhenjuan present. However, none of them dared to step forward. Just now the mockery had already disappeared. At the side, Ruxian's face was filled with admiration and her eyes shone with stars. She looked intoxicated and was just short of pouncing on him. Hey! Yu Hanyan could not stand it any longer and nudged Ruxian gently, sending a voice transmission, "Be careful, you're drooling." Ruxian blushed and sent a voice transmission with her spirit consciousness. Little Granduncle Master is just a little ordinary and boorish. If he were more handsome, he would be perfect. Les, how can you say something like that? Aren't you ashamed? Yu Hanyan spat softly. Ruxian had a nervous expression and said hurriedly, "Senior sister, you already have senior brother Nangong. You're not allowed to fight with me for him." All right. I won't fight with you. It's all yours." Yu Hanyan had a helpless expression. Ruxian's thoughts flew as she fantasized alone and murmured, "Senior sister, if I become Dao companions with little Granduncle Master, won't the seniority be messed up? Won't Master have to bow when he sees me?" Waha! It's exciting just thinking about it. Ruxian laughed as she thought about it. This child is crazy. Yu Hanyan shook her head. On the other side, the group of people from Five Elements sect who were mocking Ji Chengtian just now felt embarrassed. Finally, someone sneered, "Fufu, 100 Refinement sect won't be able to jump around for long. At that time, someone will deal with you guys without us even having to do anything." Su Zimo turned around slightly and glared at the person who spoke. The Five Elements sect cultivator felt his hair stand on end when he was stared at by Su Zimo. The person had the intention to retreat and mustered his courage. "You don't have to look at me. When the 1,000 Crane Tea Party begins, I'll see how 100 Refinement sect is trampled into the ground. Let's go." With that said, he turned to leave. Swash! A gentle breeze blew past. Su Zimo had already vanished from the spot. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the Five Elements sect cultivator. "Who allowed you to leave?" Su Zimo said indifferently. Before the person could react, he reached out and grabbed the person's throat, flicking his wrist. Crackle! That person's bones were all dislocated. Suddenly, Su Zimo reached out and slapped the person on the cheek. Piak! There was a crisp sound. Instantly, the person's cheek swelled. Piak! It was another sound. Being slapped in the face in front of so many people was a great humiliation to a cultivator. Well done. Serves you right for having a cheap mouth. Ruxian spat at the person and cursed fiercely. Chapter 930. Piak, Piak, Piak. Su Zimo lifted the Five Elements sect cultivator and slapped him a few times. He only stopped when the person's face turned into a pig's head. Ji Chengtian watched from the side and felt relieved. Just now, this group of cultivators had mocked and ridiculed him from the side, but he could only endure it. To think that this passerby whom he had met by chance would help him vent his anger. Su Zimo tossed him casually. The person collapsed limply on the ground with a mouth full of blood. All his teeth were shattered and he could not say a single word, merely grunting softly. A Five Elements sect cultivator's eyes were spitting fire as he said in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, leave your name if you have the guts. Five Elements sect will remember today's humiliation and repay you in the future." Su Zimo's expression was indifferent. Before he could say anything, a cultivator in the crowd exclaimed, "It's him. I've seen him before." "Who?" A month ago in Wind Cloud City, Jining Jinjuan crippled Changpeng, defeated Jian Wuzong and snatched away the startling Dermic sword. There's no way I'm wrong. Ah! The crowd was in an uproar. The battle a month ago had long spread through Chiguramon, and was the topic of discussion for many cultivators recently. Everyone knew that the paragons of Heavenly Dipper sect and Sword sect would definitely regain their dignity at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party. At that time there would definitely be a huge battle. I heard that this person not only defeated Jian Wuzong back then, under his suppression Jian Wuzong did not even have the chance to attack. Who is this person? Why haven't I heard of him before? I think his name is Emoling. Su Zimo did not hide the name Emoling. It wasn't difficult to gather this information in a month's time. Most cultivators were confused when they heard that name. Only Ji Chengtian's heart skipped a beat. Back at Misty Peak, he had heard that Su Zimo had changed his name to Emoling and lived in the capital of Great Zhou. After that, he shocked the entire Great Zhou dynasty with a single feat during the sect tournament. That being said, he did not participate in the inter-sect competition, thus he was unaware of the details. There were countless cultivators in the world called Emoling. Furthermore, apart from the green robes, Emoling and Su Zimo did not have any similarities at all. Ji Chengtian had never associated Emoling with Su Zimo. However, hearing Emoling's name made him recall some past events. Let's go. He won't be proud for long. That's right. When Hang Chuyu of Sword Sect and perfected Lord Panglan of Heavenly Dipper Sect arrive, he'll be in for a good show. The members of the Five Elements sect spat out a few more harsh words before they turned around and left. When the surrounding cultivators saw that there was no more excitement, they gradually dispersed. Arriving before Su Zimo, Jichentan bowed slightly with a smile. I am Jichentan of Elixir Yang Sect. Thank you for your help, fellow Taoist. I'm Emoling. Su Zimo also cupped his fists and looked at Ji Chengtian with a faint smile. For some reason, Ji Chengtian had a feeling that the way Emoling looked at him was a little strange, as though they were not distant. Hello, my name is Ru Xian. Ru Xian came forward as well and waved to Ji Chengtian. This is my little granduncle master. He's strong, right? Yes, Ji Chengtian nodded sincerely. Fellow Taoist, I'm impressed that you're strong. Pausing for a moment, Ji Chengtian continued, however, I heard that the combat strength of Hang Chuyu and perfected Lord Panglan is not to be underestimated as well. Fellow Taoist, you have to be careful and not underestimate your enemies. When they heard the names of the two experts, Nangong Ling and the other two revealed worried expressions. The three of you can head back first. Su Zimo turned around and instructed Nangong Ling and the other two, settle down at your residence and don't wander off. At this moment, there are countless people watching 100 Refinement Sect. It's not safe here either. What about you, little granduncle master? Ru Xian asked. I have something else to attend to. You guys head back first. Su Zimo's tone was calm but unquestionable. Nangong Ling and the other two exchanged glances and bowed before retreating towards their residences. Since you have something important to attend to, I won't disturb you any further. Jichentan cupped his fists. Fellow Taoist, if you need any help in the future, feel free to look for me at Elixir Yang Sect. I'll definitely do my best. Su Zimo smiled. What a coincidence. I have something to look for you about right now. Oh, Ji Chengtian said hurriedly. Please speak, fellow Taoist. Su Zimo looked around. Ji Chengtian swept his gaze and saw that there were still many cultivators loitering nearby, spying on them. Immediately, he understood and said, Fellow Taoist, if you don't mind, please come to my residence for a detailed discussion. All right, Su Zimo agreed without hesitation. The residence of Elixir Yang Sect was not far from here. The two of them sped all the way and arrived in a short while. Ji Chengtian poured a cup of hot tea for Su Zimo before saying, Fellow Taoist, there's no one else here. Please speak your mind. Brother Ji, how have you been? The muscles on Su Zimo's face twitched and his bones mutated. In the blink of an eye, he returned to his handsome appearance and smiled at Ji Chengtian. Ji Chengtian's eyes widened when he saw that. First, his eyes were filled with shock before ecstasy. Ah! Ji Chengtian exclaimed and took a step forward, grabbing Su Zimo's wrist excitedly. Su Zimo shook his head gently and shushed him. Ji Chengtian took a deep breath hurriedly and calmed himself down, whispering, Zimo, it's you. It's great to see that you're fine. Even though Ji Chengtian's voice was suppressed, he could not conceal his joy and his voice was trembling in excitement. Su Zimo patted Ji Chengtian on the shoulder. I'm fine. Sorry for making everyone worry. We know that you shouldn't be in any danger given your capabilities. However, we were still worried when there was no news of you for the past 100 years. Ji Chengtian hammered Su Zimo's chest and smiled. Now that I see that you're fine, I'm relieved. I heard about what happened to you guys. A killing intent flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Don't worry, Brother Ji. I'll definitely take Di Yin's life. When he heard Su Zimo mention this, Ji Changtian seemed to recall the pursuit and still had lingering fear. His face was pale as he shook his head. 80 years ago, Di Yin was already at perfected nascent soul when he came out of seclusion and found us. Di Yin is way too strong. Without fighting him, you can't imagine how strong he is. In front of him I had no way of fighting back at all. At that time, it was fortunate that an expert of Elixir Yang sect was nearby and saved me. I only fully recovered after recuperating for more than 10 years. After a moment of silence, Ji Chengtian continued, Don't worry, little Fatty is fine as well. He was severely injured by Di Yin and entered a tomb by accident. It was a blessing in disguise. Suddenly, Su Zimo frowned and murmured, 80 years ago, Di Yin was at perfected nascent soul when he came out of seclusion. This means that he only took 20 years to enter the nascent soul realm and cultivate to perfected nascent soul? Ji Chengtian nodded with a bitter smile. That person's fortune is frightening and his talent is shocking. Coupled with the inheritance of the human emperor, he's like a tiger that has grown wings. He's truly a monster incarnate that only appears once in 10,000 years. Chapter 931. In just 20 years, Di Yin had cultivated from early-stage nascent soul to perfected nascent soul. That cultivation speed was unimaginable. No one knew what sort of opportunity he had obtained. Even Su Zimo did not expect that Di Yin would be able to rise against the tides and advance to such an extent after being suppressed by him once. Suddenly, Su Zimo thought of something and frowned. If Di Yin was already at perfected nascent soul 80 years ago, what's his cultivation realm now? Void Reversion Realm. Ji Chengtian said. I heard that he broke through to the Void Reversion Realm 50 years ago. I'm not sure what level he's at now. Good, you did not disappoint me indeed. When Su Zimo heard that Di Yin was so strong, he was not afraid at all. Instead, his fighting spirit surged and his eyes shone with a torrential aura. It was not as though he had never killed a Void Reversion expert before. Ji Chengtian was filled with emotions as he looked at his old friend before him. 100 years had passed. That monster incarnate of history who was invincible among his peers and suppressed the alien races had not changed. He was still domineering. He was still domineering. He was still condescending. Su Zimo was the only one who would dare to say something as such. However, I reckon that Di Yin won't appear for the Thousand Crane Tea Party this time round. Ji Chengtian analyzed. Firstly, the Thousand Crane Tea Party is a gathering of nascent soul paragons. He's already a void reversion and won't be bothered by it. Secondly, Chaos Essence Sect has Yi Tiancheng to settle everything for this tea party. He's a monster incarnate that's not weaker than Di Yin. Thirdly, Di Yin doesn't know about your return either. Su Zimo's gaze was deep as he said coolly, It's fine. He'll definitely appear. Ji Chengtian's heart skipped a beat. He could hear the killing intent in Su Zimo's tone and asked softly, You're not going to hide your identity anymore? Let nature take its course. Su Zimo said, At the Thousand Crane Tea Party hosted by the Dharma Dao Jun, all the major forces will gather. Even if I want to hide it, I'm afraid I can't. After sending Hakuya Dojin back to 100 Refinement Sect safely, it was no longer important whether Su Zimo's identity was hidden or not. Moreover, he was already prepared for the worst. His identity had been exposed. Su Zimo pondered for a moment before asking, Have you heard the rumors about the marriage between Leng Ro and Yi Tiancheng? Ji Chengtian nodded. Initially, I wasn't sure if Leng Ro was forced into this marriage. But just now, I'm almost certain that Leng Ro has no choice. Just now, when he went to pay his respects, the two cultivators standing guard didn't enter to report. It was clear that they had received some sort of instruction. Otherwise, given his relationship with Leng Ro, she wouldn't have refused to meet him at all. Ji Chengtian thought for a moment and continued, Zimo, you don't have to worry too much. There's still a talisman competition at the Thousand Crane Tea Party. At that time, Leng Ro will definitely appear. Since he came up with such a despicable method to force me to appear, I'll fulfill his wish. Su Zimo exuded a shuddering killing intent as he said slowly, After not seeing each other for 100 years, I want to see how much the paragons of Tianhuang mainland have improved. A moment later, Su Zimo retracted his killing intent and asked, by the way, where's Xiaoning? Has she been well all these years? Did she attend the 1,000 Crane Tea Party this time round? Ji Chengtian had a strange expression at the mention of Xiaoning. He shook his head. Ever since Xiaoning and Night Spirit headed to the North region 100 years ago, she hasn't returned to the sect. However, every once in a while, Xiaoning will send a message to the sect to report that she's safe. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. After not seeing her for 100 years, he missed and was worried about Xiaoning the most. To think that she would not return for 100 years. Thankfully, she was accompanied by Night Spirit and should not be in any danger. However, if they missed this opportunity, who knew how long it would take for the two of them to meet again? After not seeing each other for 100 years, the two of them chatted for the entire night. It was only at dawn that Su Zimo transformed into his rough appearance and returned to his residence in 100 Refinement Sect. For the next 3 days, Su Zimo did not leave his residence. Almost all the major sects, factions, upper sects and aristocratic families of the Middle Continent had arrived. Heavenly Dipper Sect, Snowdrift Valley, Chaos Essence Sect, Zephyr Thunder Palace, Sword Sect and Soaring Feather Sect. The 6 immortal sects of the Middle Continent were all present. When perfected Lord Panglan and Hang Chouyu arrived, it caused quite a stir. Many cultivators headed over to catch a glimpse of their glory. When Chaos Essence Sect's Yi Tiancheng arrived, it caused an even greater commotion. It was not only Chiguramon. Almost all the cultivators of the major sects rushed over. It was rumored in the cultivation world that although Yi Tiancheng had just entered the nascent soul realm and was only at early stage nascent soul realm, his combat strength was so strong that he could be conferred as the #1 perfected lord. That title was way too great. It was unprecedented for an early-stage nascent soul to be conferred as the #1 perfected lord. Of course, when the title was first spread, there were naturally many nascent soul paragons who were indignant and challenged him. However, they were all killed by Yi Tiancheng. From then on, the voices of opposition gradually disappeared. On the day Yi Tiancheng arrived, even Nangong Ling and the other two could not help but run out to take a look. Su Zimo was the only one who remained in his residence with his eyes closed, as though he was not interested in the so-called paragons. Among the Buddhist monasteries, Hollow Monastery, Formless Monastery and Wisdom Monastery had already arrived at Chiguramon. Mingzhan's Depamkara Monastery was in the southern region, and was far away so he did not participate. As for the upper sects of the Middle Continent, there were dozens of them and almost all of them were here. Peach Blossom Peak, Tyrant Emperor Mountain, 5 Elements Sect, Heavenly Sea God Sect, Sun Moon Residence, Meteor Sect, Heaven Net Dock, Returning Unity Pavilion, Profound Frost Sect, Unparalleled Sword Sect, Great Change Academy, Traceless Temple, Mystic Sun House, Azure Cloud Monastery, 7 Luminaries Hall. This day the 1,000 Crane Tea Party officially began. Many sects and cultivators moved one after another. Under the lead of Chiguramon cultivators, they headed to the Mystic Courtyard where the Mystic Tea Tree was located. Along the way, Dao Bing Yuding explained, I heard that there are a total of 527 cups of Mystic Tea this time round and there are only 5 supreme-grade Mystic Tea. Now that they were close, they could clearly see that there were 5 emerald green tea leaves growing at the top of the Mystic Tea Tree. Each tea leaf could only be brewed into a cup of supreme-grade Mystic Tea. The 1,000 Crane Tea Party this time round is mainly divided into 2 parts. Dao Bing Yuding continued, the first part is the competition between the 4 unorthodox groups. They are the battle of formations, talismans, elixir refinement and weapon refinement. The hearts of many hundred refinement sect cultivators skipped a beat. The glory of the sect lay in the first part of the weapon refinement competition. Dao Bing Yuding said, if nothing goes wrong, this weapon refinement competition should be ranked at the end of the 4 competitions. Junior Sister Lu, try your best to relax and perform well. I'll do my best. Yu Hanyan nodded. Dao Bing Yuding continued, the first part is considered as taking care of the 4 unorthodox groups. The final victor of each round will be able to drink a cup of supreme-grade Mystic Tea. We've made a killing this time. Ru Xian clapped her hands. Sister Han Yen, if you win, You can even drink a cup of supreme-grade mystic tea. Yu Hanyan merely smiled without saying anything. She knew very well that her chances of winning this weapon refinement competition were less than 30%. The best-case scenario would be a draw. Chapter 932. Dao Bing Yuding said, "There's still a cup of supreme-grade mystic tea left. That's the second part, the fight between the paragons. The last cup of supreme-grade mystic tea is extremely important. Only the number 1 perfected lord of the Middle Continent is qualified to drink it." Nangong Ling lamented, "I wonder if it's Yi Tiancheng or perfected lord Pang Lan. I feel that only the 2 top of the phenomenon ranking are qualified to compete for the 5th cup of supreme-grade mystic tea." "I bet on Yi Tiancheng," Ru Xian said before turning to ask, "Little Granduncle Master, what do you think?" Su Zimo said indifferently, "I bet that neither of them can drink it." "Oh, why?" Ru Xian asked curiously. Su Zimo smiled and said in a seemingly casual manner, "Because I won't let them." "Little Granduncle Master, you're bragging again." When she heard that, Ru Xian giggled as well and did not take it to heart. Right then, everyone from 100 Refinement Sect had already entered the courtyard with the Chiguramon cultivators. The moment they entered the mystic courtyard, everyone from 100 Refinement Sect felt a momentary silence in the initially bustling courtyard. In the courtyard, most of the sects and factions were already in position. The gathering of the nascent Soul Realm prodigies was a spectacular sight. This was a rare cultivation grand event after the phenomenon ranking. At that moment, after 100 Refinement Sect entered the mystic courtyard, gazes pierced over one after another in a fiery manner. 100 Refinement Sect is here. I heard that a ruthless character appeared in 100 Refinement Sect and defeated a few paragons consecutively. He has already angered many sects and factions. What's the use of being ruthless? Which of the paragons present isn't ruthless? Fufu, 100 Refinement Sect is already on the decline, and is about to be removed from the 4 unorthodox groups. 100 Refinement Sect was already in a precarious situation, and was at the heart of the storm the moment they appeared. The 1,000 Crane Tea Party was held once every 1,000 years. Most of the 100 Refinement Sect cultivators had never experienced such a scene before. Coupled with the worrying situation of the sect, many cultivators felt uneasy. Even Nangong Ling and the other 2 were nervous. Now, the only one who could remain calm was Su Zimo. In this short period of time, he could already feel many sharp gazes lingering on him, filled with killing intent. Su Zimo looked indifferent and couldn't be bothered to respond. "Fellow Taoists of the 100 Refinement Sect, this way please." The Chiguramon cultivator pointed at an area not far away and said in a deep voice. Everyone from 100 Refinement Sect looked over, and their expressions darkened. That was where the 4 unorthodox groups were located. However, at this moment, other than the ancient Array Sect, Elixir Yang Sect and Chiguramon, there was another group of cultivators standing there. These cultivators' Taoist robes were dull gray, with a ball of netherworld fire embroidered on their sleeves. Hellfire Hall. Before the tea party truly began, the seats occupied by 100 Refinement Sect and Hellfire Hall were already at odds with each other and were filled with hostility. This was originally the area where the 4 unorthodox groups were stationed. Now 5 sects had appeared. Their intentions were self-evident. The loser of this artifact refining competition would lose the right to stay in this area. Dao Bing Yuding's expression darkened and he did not say anything. Since Hellfire Hall could stand here, it was clear that they had obtained Chiguramon's approval. Even if they protested, nothing would happen. Hellfire Hall was already established. The void reversion in the lead is called Perfected Lord Qianfeng. Behind him is Ming Han, the person who will be fighting Senior Sister Lu this time round. Ru Xian whispered. Su Zimo swept his gaze and noticed Ming Han right away. The cultivator was very young and exuded a cold aura. He raised his chin slightly in an arrogant manner. Before long, everyone from 100 Refinement Sect was in position. That should be Perfected Lord Pang Lan. Nangong Ling looked in the direction of Heavenly Dipper Sect, and saw Jining Zhenjuan standing at the front. His long hair fluttered and his eyes were long and narrow. At that moment he was looking at Su Zimo with a faint smile. That's Hangchoyu. Nangongling looked to the other side. Su Zimo looked over. After not seeing him for 100 years, Hangchoyu had changed quite a bit and was already at the peak of late-stage nascent soul realm. Although he was sharp, it was condensed and restrained. His sword Dao realm was clearly higher than Jian Wuzong's. Zephyr Thunder Palace, Snowdrift Valley Nangongling, and Ruxian introduced the paragons of the immortal and Buddhist sects to Su Zimo. Su Zimo was distracted and merely nodded occasionally in response. Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the crowd as many cultivators shouted with shining eyes. Not far away, Chaos Essence sect cultivators numbered about 1,000 and sped over in a majestic manner. The most eye-catching thing was the 9 WRMS at the front. The 9 WRMS rode side by side on clouds with a rumbling aura. Together they pulled a gigantic throne over slowly. WRMS were pure-blooded ferocious beasts. It was already a great opportunity for ordinary cultivators to obtain one of them. But now the 9 WRMS were only controlled by a single person. Look, Yi Tianqing is here. How spectacular! It's no wonder why he's the #1 perfected lord. A cultivator sat on the throne. He was extremely handsome and young and his eyes were closed, as though he was taking a nap. He exuded an invincible aura that swept through everything. Around the throne, there were 9 extremely beautiful women. Some were playing flutes, some were scattering flowers, and some were gently fanning themselves with a feather fan. The most frightening thing was that the 9 women accompanying him were also at the nascent soul realm. In fact, one of the women was at perfected nascent soul. Even though she had already cultivated to this realm, she was still willing to become the maidservant of the cultivator on the throne. It was clear how terrifying this person was. Chaos Essence Sect, #1 of the phenomenon ranking Yi Tianqing. The moment he appeared, he attracted countless gazes. Indeed, no one could compare to his grandeur. Nangongling could not help but lament and say in admiration, as expected of the #1 perfected lord. Who can compare to his grandeur? When Yi Tianqing appeared, all the cultivators present, including the void reversions, were shocked. Even the #1 of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago, perfected Lord Panglan, who was rumored to be half a step into the void reversion realm, had a grim expression. Su Zimo was the only one who did not blink the entire time. Yu Hanyan and Ruxian were even more surprised when they saw that. It was truly hard for them to imagine that there were cultivators who could remain unmoved and calm against Yi Tianqing's aura. As expected of the 2 paragons of Chaos Essence Sect, the rise of Chaos Essence Sect is inevitable. It's no wonder why the Chigaramon Patriarch worked so hard to facilitate this marriage alliance. Yi Tianqing's potential is limitless, and there's a high chance that he will become an emperor in the future. In the blink of an eye, everyone from Chaos Essence Sect had already arrived in the courtyard. The 9 WRMs surveyed their surroundings with a ferocious gaze and let out deep growls from their noses. Many cultivators retreated with fearful expressions. Be quiet, Yi Tianqing said slowly and opened his eyes. When the 9 WRMs heard that voice, they quietened down instantly and sprawled on the ground obediently like 9 little snakes. It's only been a few days and you're even more elegant than before, Brother Yi. Right then, a Hellfire Hall cultivator walked towards Yi Tianqing. Before he arrived, he cupped his fists and laughed. Nangongling frowned. It's Ming Han. How does he know Yi Tianqing? Furthermore, it seems like the 2 of them are on good terms, Ruxian murmured with a worried expression. If Ming Han was on good terms with Yi Tianqing, did that mean that Chaos Essence Sect would stand on the side of Hellfire Hall for the Thousand Crane Tea Party? Furthermore, they would stand up for Hellfire Hall. Chapter 933. Brother Ming Han, how have you been? Yi Tianqing stood on his throne and did not stand up. Or rather, none of the cultivators in the mystic courtyard were worthy of him standing up to welcome. Yi Tianqing waved his hand gently and the 9 WRMs in front of him understood and opened up a path for Ming Han to enter. Yi Tianqing sat on his throne high and mighty. Ming Han stood below. However, this was already enough to make many cultivators envious. To many cultivators, it was already a great honor to be on friendly terms with Yi Tianqing and be able to converse with him at such a close distance. The atmosphere on 100 Refinement Sect's side was a little oppressive. The closer Ming Han was to Yi Tiancheng, the worse 100 Refinement Sect situation would be. A moment later, Dao Bing Yuding turned around and consoled Yu Hanyan, junior sister Lu, you don't have to worry. As long as you win the weapon refinement competition and make a name for the sect, so what if Ming Han knows Yi Tiancheng? Yes, Yu Hanyan nodded and pursed her lips without saying anything. Su Zimo sighed internally. Although Dao Bing Yuding's original intention was to comfort her, his words clearly gave Yu Hanyan even more pressure. Right then, the doors of the inner courtyard of the Mystic Courtyard opened and a group of beautiful female cultivators walked out. They were of all shapes and sizes and each had their own merits. The woman at the front wore a white dress and her sleeves fluttered. She was extremely beautiful and had an indifferent expression. There was no aura of mortals around her, and she was truly like a fairy that had descended into the mortal realm. However, the woman's gaze was cold and she was like an ice mountain, causing many cultivators to shrink back. Wow! Fairy Lung Ro has appeared. She's truly peerless and devastatingly beautiful, the crowd exclaimed. Although it was not a grand occasion, the commotion caused by Lung Ro's appearance was no less than Yi Tiancheng's. Su Zimo raised his head and looked at the woman who was walking over slowly. His gaze was gentle as he revealed a heartfelt smile. After not seeing her for 100 years, Lung Ro had become even colder and was incomparable. Su Zimo was happy from the bottom of his heart when he saw that his old friend was fine. Although Lung Ro was in a predicament right now, since he was already here, he naturally would not let his old friend suffer any grievances. Su Zimo looked at Lung Ro in a daze filled with thoughts. Beside him Ru Xian. Humph! Ru's mouths. V. You. Hey, be careful, your saliva is going to come out. Lu Hanyan furrowed her brows in surprise. In her impression, Su Zimo was not a flirtatious person. She was a beauty to begin with. Back when the two of them first met, Su Zimo had never revealed such a gaze and smile. Furthermore, even Yi Tiancheng could not move Su Zimo. Did Fairy Lung Ro possess such magical powers? Yu Hanyan could not understand. Furthermore, she noticed that Su Zimo did not look at Fairy Lung Ro with infatuation, adoration or lecherous eyes. Su Zimo looked at Fairy Lung Ro with a clear and gentle gaze. Yu Hanyan glanced sideways at Yi Tiancheng who was not far away. At that moment, Yi Tiancheng was looking at Lung Ro as well. However, Yi Tiancheng's gaze was condescending and possessive, causing Yu Hanyan to feel extremely uncomfortable. Lung Ro, I'm here. Yi Tiancheng stood up slowly and looked at Lung Ro with a smile. He had an arrogant expression, as though he was waiting for Lung Ro's response. Unfortunately, Lung Ro did not even look at him. The situation was a little awkward. The clamor in the surroundings died down as well. A cold glint flashed through Yi Tiancheng's eyes. Thereafter, he chuckled and sat back down with a carefree expression, as though he did not care. Foo-foo. To be precise, the 9 maidservants did not have names and were only numbered from Yi1 to Yi9. Many void reversions of the Chiguramon frowned when they heard that explanation but did not say anything. It was a tacit agreement. The hearts of the cultivators turned cold. Yi Tiancheng's words were completely unreasonable. If Yi Qi severed the head of a Jining Jinjuan, the Jining Jinjuan's body would be destroyed. Before long, his blood qi would dry up after his head was severed. Even if that person's essence spirit did not leave his body and resided in the withered head, he would not be able to last long and would still die. Yi Qi's slash was no different from killing that person directly. Everyone understood that logic. However, many void reversions of the Chiguramon tacitly acknowledged it. This matter showed the Chiguramon's attitude towards Yi Tiancheng. Tisk tsk. The number 1 of the phenomenon ranking sure is impressive. Right then, another scoff sounded from the courtyard that was filled with mockery and mockery. Chapter 934. The crowd was shocked. Earlier on, someone was killed on the spot by Yi Tiancheng's maidservant just because they laughed. Even Chiguramon did not appear and chose to acquiesce. To think that someone would still dare to speak at this moment. Furthermore, this time round, The person was practically mocking Yi Tiancheng by name and challenging his authority. Many cultivators realized that someone was about to die again. When he heard that voice, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he could not help but smile. To think that he would be here as well. Ji Chengtian looked around with a surprised and delighted expression. Initially, Leng Rou's expression was indifferent. However, when she heard that voice, her expression changed slightly and a hint of warmth flashed through her cold eyes. Yi Tiancheng narrowed his eyes and surveyed his surroundings. Initially, the 9 maidservants beside him frowned as well and scanned the crowd. However, they were hesitant and did not move for a long time. But now that voice sounded erratically and they could not determine its direction. They could not be sure at all. Fufu, what are you squinting at? Look at that silly look of yours. The mocking voice sounded once more. This time round, the provocation was even more intense and it was a personal attack. Even ordinary people would not be able to tolerate such provocation, let alone the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking and the number 1 perfected lord, Yi Tiancheng. There was a thud. Yi Tiancheng stood up with a murderous aura and his glabella shone. A massive spirit consciousness was released and enveloped the entire courtyard. A moment later, Yi Tiancheng still did not move and his expression was terrible. He did not discover anything. After his spirit consciousness descended, the voice seemed to have vanished into thin air and was hidden as well. Even the void reversions present could not find the person who spoke, let alone him. Yi Tiancheng took a deep breath and retracted his spirit consciousness slowly with a dark gaze. Sitting back down. Aya, you scared me to death. Yi Tiancheng had just retracted his divine sense. Before his butt could even touch the throne, the mocking voice rang out again. It's not that I want to say this, but your Hunyuan sect is really temperamental. You can't stand it when others laugh. Now that you can't find me, are you going to explode from anger? Su Zimo laughed inwardly. Unexpectedly, after 100 years, Little Fatty had become even more mischievous. Moreover, it had to be said that Little Fatty's concealment technique was quite brilliant. Su Zimo could only vaguely determine Little Fatty's position by relying on his powerful 6 senses. Little Fatty kept moving through the crowd. However, there seemed to be some kind of treasure on his body that could conceal his aura, making it impossible for others to discover him. Moreover, he moved very slowly and carefully. Which scoundrel is hiding his head but showing his tail? Yi Tiancheng's face darkened as he said slowly, show yourself if you have the guts. No, I'm really timid, Little Fatty said. You kill people at the drop of a hat and the Chigurman doesn't care either. Who wouldn't be afraid? Not only was he mocking Yi Tiancheng for killing the innocent, he was also mocking the Chigurman. Many void reversions of Chigurman blushed. Yi Tiancheng closed his eyes and suddenly stopped talking, as though he had given up on searching. After a while, Little Fatty asked again, what are you doing there? Are you asleep? All of a sudden, Yi Tiancheng opened his eyes and killing intent burst forth. In a flash, he lunged into the crowd and said coldly, get the hell out. The crowd was shocked and dispersed. Only a figure in black robe stood on the spot, seemingly scared out of his wits. Boom! Yi Tiancheng's fist struck the person's chest heavily. The person's clothes were torn and he was sent flying. Although his chest was penetrated, the strange thing was that no blood flowed out. Bang! The person fell to the ground and rolled a few times before coming to a stop. Everyone focused their gazes. It was not a person at all, but a puppet made of superior-grade mystic iron. The puppet sprawled on the ground with its back facing everyone. There were a few words written on its back. The one who hit me is an idiot. Ha 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 ha. This time round, the crowd could no longer hold it in and burst into laughter. Su Zimo laughed as well. So Little Fatty was not the only one. There was also the silly Shijian who joined Puppet Sect. All of them were here. When she saw that, Leng Ro pursed her lips in shock. When her old friends found out about the marriage alliance between her and Yi Tiancheng, they rushed over without hesitation despite knowing that it might be a trap. It was the same for Ji Chengtan. It was the same for Little Fatty and Shijian. To begin with, Leng Ro was not an emotional person. However, at that moment, she felt her nose sting and her eyes reddened. Yi Tiancheng's expression was extremely dark. In fact, He even had a thought to kill all the cultivators who were laughing at that moment. However, he knew that that was not realistic. Although he was the number one of the phenomenon ranking and the number one perfected lord, it was impossible for him to do that. Stop fooling around. Right then a soft shout sounded from afar. 3 graceful figures stepped through the air with powerful auras and unbridled might. The 3 Dharma Daojun. The 3 female cultivators looked to be middle-aged, but they were still beautiful and exuded a mature charm that young girls did not have. The leader of the female cultivators was the patriarch of Chiguramon, Arikatsuki Michinoku. Standing on both sides of her were elders of Chiguramon. Arikatsuki Michinoku swept her gaze across the crowd and said indifferently, "If the 2 of you are here to attend the Thousand Crane Tea Party, Chiguramon will naturally welcome you. However, if you're here to cause trouble, don't blame me for chasing you out." No matter how brilliant Little Fatty and Shijian's methods were, they could not hide under the envelopment of a Dharma-characteristic Tao Lord's spirit consciousness. Little Fatty and Shijian sneaked over to Chiguramon's side before revealing themselves. The 2 of them made faces at Yi Tiancheng. At that moment, the Chiguramon patriarch was present. No matter how strong Yi Tiancheng was, he would not dare to start a massacre right in front of the Chiguramon patriarch. "Sister Patriarch, please don't chase us out." Little Fatty smiled and bowed to Arikatsuki Michinoku. Although Arikatsuki Michinoku was expressionless, she was overjoyed to hear him call her sister Patriarch. Although she looked to be middle-aged, she had lived for thousands of years. How could she not be happy to hear a child more than 100 years old call her sister? Little Fatty said, "Sister Patriarch, Yi Tiancheng dared to kill people in your territory. If you chase us out, we'll definitely be killed by him. One shouldn't hit a smiling person." The Little Fatty's mouth was still so sweet. Furthermore, Little Fatty and Shijian were the successors of Puppet Sect and Tomb Sect. Perfected Lord Lan Yu was naturally wary. Perfected Lord Lan Yu said, "It's good that you know. Given your fame, you're qualified to drink a cup of mystic tea." Pausing for a moment, Perfected Lord Lan Yu glared at the 2 of them warningly and said word by word, "Remember, don't cause trouble for me." Shijian was still in a daze. He didn't smile and didn't say a word. Little Fatty chuckled and managed to fool her. With a smile on her face, Lung Ro waved at the 2 of them and said, "Come over here. Call Brother Ji." "Haha. I was waiting for you to say that." Ji Chengtian laughed and walked out of the crowd. After 100 years, the 4 of them were finally reunited. To be precise, there were 5 of them. Su Zimo sat on 100 Refinement Sect's side and did not make a move, nor did he remind Lung Ro and the others. Spirit consciousness transmissions would cause spirit consciousness fluctuations. If he were to send a voice transmission at that moment, it would definitely attract the attention of others. There was no need for that for the time being. Chapter 935. So, it's the 2 of you. Yi Tiancheng had already returned to his throne. He smiled sinisterly and said faintly, "Good, very good. Let's see how long the 2 of you can hide in the Chiguramon." "Sister Patriarch, look." The Little Fatty immediately complained. "He still dares to be so arrogant in front of you. He really doesn't put you in his eyes." When he heard that, Yi Tiancheng gritted his teeth in anger, wishing he could charge into the crowd and tear Little Fatty into pieces. "That's enough." Arikatsuki Michinoku waved his hand and ignored Little Fatty, declaring, "Everyone, welcome to the Chiguramon as guests for this tea party. The tea party is mainly divided into 2 parts. I'm sure everyone knows that by now, so I won't elaborate further. First, we'll have a battle of array formations. Second, we'll have a battle of elixir refinement. Third, we'll have a battle of talismans. Fourth, we'll have the most important part of this tea party, the weapon refinement battle between 100 Refinement Sect and Hellfire Hall." Just as everyone had expected, the highly anticipated weapon refinement battle was arranged by the Chiguramon at the end. Su Zimo glanced at Ming Han of Hellfire Hall, and then at Yu Han Yun, shaking his head slightly. It was clear that the 2 of them were in completely different states. Ming Han and Yi Tiancheng chatted casually with relaxed expressions. As for Yu Han Yun, she lowered her head slightly and clenched her fists without saying a word. Su Zimo could tell that Yu Hanyun was under immense pressure and was starting to feel nervous. However, he could not help in this matter either. He was a weapon refinement master and could refine spirit weapons. However, in the current weapon refinement battle, both parties were competing to refine dermic weapons. Although there was only a single word difference between spirit weapons and dermic weapons, in reality, the difference between the two was like heaven and earth. Although Hakuya Dojin had already taught him many of the techniques and secrets of refining magic weapons, he had never tried them. There was no such thing as an epiphany when it came to crafting. What was needed was countless attempts and countless tempering. This required a lot of hard work. Hakuya Dojin had only taught him these things for 3 months. He didn't have the time to practice. The tea party had begun. The first round was a battle of array formations. The rules were simple. The ancient array sect would send a cultivator. As for the other sects and factions, including the immortal and Buddhist sects, the upper sects of the middle continent, the aristocratic families, and even the itinerant cultivators, as long as they had an array master who could defeat this ancient array sect cultivator, it would be considered a victory for the other party. If no one could defeat the ancient array sect cultivator, the ancient array sect would win. Although the rules were simple, they revealed the confidence and foundation of one of the 4 great unorthodox groups. A disciple from the ancient array sect would be able to take on all array challenges. Arikatsuki Michinoku would personally confer the title of master to the winner. For example, the final winner of a battle of array formations would be the array formation grandmaster. The final winner of an elixir refinement battle would be the elixir refinement grandmaster. A total of 4 masters would emerge from the 4 battles. All of them would be able to drink a cup of supreme-grade mystic tea. The battle of array formations was deduced in a gigantic sand table. As long as a cultivator's spirit consciousness entered it, they would be able to set up the formation. Su Zimo had studied array formations before as well. In fact, he had not abandoned them all these years. That was because for every level of the candlelight sword formation, not only would the number of flying swords increase, one would also have to comprehend the mysteries of that level. However, Su Zimo's candlelight sword formation was stuck at level 3, and was already stuck. He had already comprehended the formation of level for a long time ago. However, he did not have a matching dermic sword. Level 4 of the candlelight sword formation required 36 dermic swords. Furthermore, if he wanted to set up the formation successfully, the body, weight, length and so on of the 36 dermic swords had to be similar. Su Zimo did not know how to refine dermic weapons. It was a fool's dream if he wanted to gather 36 identical dermic swords. Therefore, he had already set aside his candlelight sword formation after advancing to the nascent soul realm. The later stages of the sword formation, the more flying swords would be required. A total of 81 flying swords were required to cultivate to level 9. The might of the candlelight sword formation was shocking. However, it was not passed down and even ancient array sect cultivators did not recognize this sword formation. That was one of the reasons. Since Su Zimo had nothing to do, he went to the sand table and watched the battle of the array formations. Approximately 4 hours later, the results were out. In the end, Perfected Lord Yanbai of Ancient Array Sect 1. Perfected Lord Yanbai eventually set up a gigantic formation and trapped more than 100 formation masters consecutively. None of them could break free. It was a dazzling achievement. Tea. Arikatsuki Michinoku smiled and waved her hand gently. A tender green tea leaf from the top of the mystic tea tree floated down and landed in the teacup. The elder beside her retrieved fresh spirit spring water and boiled it with dermic powers, turning it into a ball of water that rolled into the teacup. Shing! The fragrance of tea spread rapidly and refreshed one's mind. If the fragrance of the tea could have such an effect just by smelling it from afar, it was clear how precious the supreme-grade mystic tea was. Elder Chiguramon brewed the tea personally and sent it over. Perfected Lord Yanbai was overwhelmed by the favor, and received the supreme-grade mystic tea. Gazing at the jade green tea, she tilted her head back and drank heartily despite the heat. Perfected Lord Yanbai shuddered the moment the tea entered his stomach and assumed a lotus position. Closing his eyes, he began to cultivate and immerse himself in meditation. Ancient array sect cultivators hurriedly surrounded him and protected him in their midst to prevent anyone from disturbing him. Following that was the competition for elixir refinement. Any elixir refinement master from all over the Middle Continent could participate in the challenge. Elixir Yang sect cultivators were the ones to accept the challenge. The elixir refinement master sent by Elixir Yang sect was none other than Tang Yu, who had crossed paths with Su Zimo's group in the ancient battlefield and liked to dress up as a man. It was all thanks to Tang Yu's recommendation that Xiaoning and Ji Chengtian were able to join Elixir Yang sect back then. After so many years, Tang Yu was still the same as ever, disguised as a pale-faced scholar. From afar, she looked like a handsome young master. Su Zimo could not help but think of Xiaoning. If Xiaoning was still around, given her attainments in elixir refinement, she would definitely have a chance to fight for the title of Great Elixir Refinement Master as well. Su Zimo thought to himself. The competition for elixir refinement was shorter, and the outcome was decided in 2 hours. As expected, Tang Yu obtained the title of Great Elixir Refinement Master. Without hesitation, Arakatsuki Michinoku plucked another leaf from the mystic tea tree. The supreme grade mystic tea brewed by Elder Chiguramon was sent over. In the blink of an eye, it was the 3rd round, the talisman competition. This time round, as the host, Chiguramon could not afford to lose, and the cultivator they sent out was none other than Lung Ro. Go on. Given your strength and talent, it should be easy for you to win the title of Great Talisman Master. Arakatsuki Michinoku looked at Lung Ro and nodded with a smile, pleased with this disciple of his. Lung Ro gripped her fists slightly and swept her gaze across Ji Chengtian, Little Fatty and Shijian's faces. When she caught sight of their encouraging gazes, she finally made up her mind. Master! Lung Ro arrived before Arakatsuki Michinoku and knelt down. Arakatsuki Michinoku frowned slightly. Get up and tell me what you have to say. Master, if I can obtain the title of Great Talisman Master, I don't want anything but a single request. Lung Ro remained kneeling on the ground and said slowly with a resolute gaze. As though she realized something, perfected Lord Lan Yu's expression darkened and she hesitated for a long time before saying, Tell me about it. I'm not willing to become Dao companions with Yi Tiancheng. Lung Ro spat out that sentence word by word in a powerful and resonant manner. The moment she said that, the crowd fell into an uproar. Chapter 936. I'm unwilling. Nobody could imagine the pressure and difficulty Lung Ro had to endure to say that at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party under the gazes of countless sects, factions and paragons. It was just a short sentence, but it was even more powerful than a hysterical shout. She was resisting authority. She was defying her master's orders. Arakatsuki Michinoku's expression turned terrible as he suppressed his anger and glared at Lung Ro without saying anything. That silence was even scarier than a stern reprimand. No one knew what would happen in the next moment. It was not only Chiguramon Arakatsuki Michinoku would lose face for Lung Ro to stand out at such an important occasion and go against the master of a sect. There was a high chance that Arakatsuki Michinoku would cripple Lung Ro and expel her from the sect in a fit of anger. On the other side, Yi Tiancheng narrowed his eyes and glared at Lung Ro's back view with a dark and cold expression. Now that Lung Ro had rejected the marriage proposal, his reputation was completely ruined as well. At that moment, countless cultivators were gloating and watching him make a fool of himself. The mystic courtyard was completely silent. Even the sound of the wind disappeared. The air seemed to have frozen. Under Arakatsuki Michinoku's gaze, Lung Ro knelt on the ground and grit her teeth, enduring the pressure that was everywhere as she raised her head to meet his gaze. Against that pressure, her petite body trembled slightly. After a long time, Arakatsuki Michinoku spoke slowly and expressionlessly. Take back what you said just now and I'll pretend that I didn't hear it. The immense pressure almost destroyed Lung Ro. Ji Chengtian stood out. Little Fatty and Shijian stood out as well. The 3 of them came to Lung Ro's side silently and stood beside her. As though she had received the greatest encouragement, Lung Ro took a deep breath and looked at Arakatsuki Michinoku, saying word by word, I'm unwilling. She was not backing down. B*****. Arakatsuki Michinoku was enraged and slammed the table. Even the bystanders felt their hearts skip a beat at the Dharma Daojuan's thunderous rage. let alone Lung Ro who was kneeling below. Su Zimo remained silent and watched coldly from the sidelines. This was Chiguramon and there were 3 Dharma Daojun present. He did not dare to start a massacre. Otherwise, not only would he die, he would implicate Lung Ro and the others as well. Patriarch, don't be angry. Roer might just be confused for a moment. An elder standing beside Arikatsuki Michinoku said softly. He looked at Lung Ro and shook his head slightly, indicating for her not to go against the patriarch. Arikatsuki Michinoku looked at Lung Ro and recalled how she had interacted with her disciple all these years. Gradually, her gaze turned much gentler. No matter what, Lung Ro was the disciple she was most proud of. Arikatsuki Michinoku took a deep breath and said earnestly, Lung Ro, I know that you're unwilling. However, you have to know that I'm doing this for your own good. When he heard that, Little Fatty's face was expressionless but he sneered internally. For your own good, Fufu. At the end of the day, it's for the sect and for yourself. I've lived for thousands of years and am experienced. What haven't I seen? Arikatsuki Michinoku continued. Although you don't have any feelings for Yi Tiancheng, as long as the 2 of you become Dao companions and spend time together, you'll definitely develop feelings for each other over time. The path of cultivation is long and difficult. It's not easy to find a Dao companion who can spend the rest of your life with you. You have to cherish the opportunity before you. Little Fatty coughed gently. Sister Patriarch, you're wrong. How can the 2 of them spend time together if they don't have feelings for each other? Little Fatty chuckled. Sister Patriarch, don't take offense if I say something. Are you willing to spend time with me right now? Nothing forcibly done is sweet, Shi Jian finally said after holding it in for a long time. Haha. Many cultivators in the crowd could not help but burst into laughter. Ru Xian could not stop giggling as well. The 2 of them are way too interesting. Insolent. Arikatsuki Michinoku glared at Little Fatty and did not pester him further. He then said to Lung Ro, I know that you might have heard some rumors about Yi Tiancheng's marriage alliance with you and what sort of conspiracy is there to force someone out. However, let me tell you, those are all rumors and malicious slander by bored people. I don't think so, Little Fatty muttered. There's no smoke without fire. Yi Tiancheng is ruthless and there's nothing he won't do. Arikatsuki Michinoku's gaze shifted and his expression darkened. He looked at Little Fatty and the other 2 and said coldly, I warned you guys not to cause trouble for me. If you dare to talk nonsense again, don't blame me for being merciless and kicking you guys out of the Chiguramon. Killing intent flashed through Yi Tiancheng's eyes. With Arikatsuki Michinoku around, it was not appropriate for him to kill Little Fatty and the other 2. However, if he chased Little Fatty and the other 2 out of the Chiguramon, he would have no qualms. At that thought, Yi Tiancheng stood up and declared, Senior Lanue. The 3 of them are clearly up to no good and want to cause trouble. I'm sure no one has any objections to kicking them out of the 1,000 Crane Tea Party. Yi Tiancheng could no longer suppress the killing intent in his heart. His reputation had been tarnished time and time again at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party, and he was already fuming internally. As long as Little Fatty and the other 2 left the Chiguramon, he would find an excuse to leave the Mystic Courtyard temporarily and hunt them down personally. Sister Patriarch, look, Yi Tiancheng can't wait to attack us. I can guarantee that once we leave this place, Yi Tiancheng will definitely chase after us. Little Fatty was smart and saw through Yi Tiancheng's thoughts with a single glance. Arikatsuki Michinoku frowned slightly. She also understood that if she chased Little Fatty and the other 2 out of the Chiguramon, it would be no different from killing them. However, the 3 of them were truly a headache for her. At that moment, Yi Tiancheng's gaze was dark as he looked at Lung Ro's back view with resentment. Lung Ro's public rejection of the marriage was a huge blow to his reputation. Yi Tiancheng had never suffered such humiliation. Initially, he only intended to marry Lung Ro and make her a maidservant, but now Yi Tiancheng changed his mind. He wanted to marry Lung Ro and torture her viciously, so that she would wish she was dead and be a slave for the rest of her life. At that thought, Yi Tiancheng suddenly laughed and declared, Junior sister Lung Ro, don't listen to the rumors outside. My sincerity towards you can be witnessed by the sun and moon. When she heard that, Arakatsuki Michinoku was satisfied and nodded with a smile. Yi Tianqing continued, I have some ties with Ming Han of Hellfire Hall. He has already promised me that if he can refine a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon in this weapon refinement competition, he will give it to me. As for this Khanate Dermic weapon, I'll pass it to you. I hope that it can express my sincerity. Of course, this is just a small greeting gift. The crowd was in an uproar. Gifting a Khanate Dermic weapon was a shocking gift. Most of the female cultivators present revealed envious expressions. Yi Tianqing was an unprecedented paragon to begin with. He was handsome and elegant with a limitless future. Now that he was gifting a Khanate Dermic weapon as a greeting gift, who could reject it? Arakatsuki Michinoku looked at Yi Tianqing and nodded in satisfaction. He then looked at Lung Ro and persuaded. You heard it as well. Yi Tianqing is a good child and is truly sincere towards you. He gave away a Khanate Dermic weapon just like that. Phew! Right then, another sneer sounded from the crowd that was filled with mockery. Chapter 937. Who was laughing? The cultivators were shocked. Arakatsuki Michinoku had just finished speaking and someone actually dared to laugh as such. That was a challenge to the dignity of the Dharma Daojun, the master of a sect. Everyone turned to look at 100 Refinement sect. At that moment, Nangong Ling and the other two were so scared that their hearts almost popped out. What is little granduncle master trying to do? Nangong Ling and the other two could naturally tell that the mocking laughter came from Su Zimo, who was sitting beside them. Little granduncle master, this is a matter of the Chiguramon. Are you going to stand out? Ruxian hurriedly sent a voice transmission with her spirit consciousness, wanting to remind Su Zimo. Nangong Ling was also scared out of her wits as she sent a voice transmission. Little granduncle master, don't be rash. Fairy Lung Ro is indeed devastatingly beautiful, but you have to wake up and not be so rash. The three of them could tell that if Arakatsuki Michinoku did not relent, nobody could help Lung Ro. Furthermore, the number one of the phenomenon ranking the number one perfected lord, was watching from the side. If they stood out now, not only would they offend the Chiguramon patriarch, they would also offend Yi Tianqing. Who could withstand that? Right then, Arakatsuki Michinoku's gaze turned over. Nangong Ling and the other two felt their hearts skip a beat as they hurriedly retracted their spirit consciousnesses and did not dare to send voice transmissions rashly. The three of them looked at Su Zimo nervously and shook their heads repeatedly. Su Zimo had an indifferent expression and merely smiled at the three of them. He had no intention of backing down. Even if he was facing the Dharma Daojun, he had to stand out. That was because Lung Ro, Little Fatty, and the others alone could no longer withstand the double pressure from the sect master and Yi Tianqing. This matter could only be shouldered by him. What are you laughing at? Arakatsuki Michinoku asked slowly. Behind his calm voice, there seemed to be a volcano that was about to erupt. Against the pressure of the Dharma Daojun, Su Zimo smiled with a composed expression. Everyone knows that even the top weapon refinement masters cannot guarantee that they can refine Khanate Dermic weapons. Someone made an empty promise and promised something that was uncertain. What a good plan. Hearing this, many cultivators gradually came to their senses. It was still unknown if Ming Han could refine Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapons. In other words, the promise that Yi Tianqing had made just now was probably just an illusion. Little Fatty slapped his forehead and said in realization, Sister Lung Ro, Yi Tianqing, that brat is up to no good. He's too scheming. If that's the case, I know how to do it too. Naturally, Little Fatty wanted nothing more than for the world to be in chaos. Surveying his surroundings, he shouted, blind date, blind date. Whoever is willing to become my Dao companion, I'll give you a Khanate Dermic treasure as a greeting gift when I excavate any tomb in the future. Ha 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 ha. Everyone burst into laughter. Little Fatty was even more exaggerated. He had even promised a Dermic treasure that only Mahayana patriarchs could use. Furthermore, it was a Khanate Dermic treasure. Yi Tianqing's gaze was dark. Although he was still smiling, his heart was filled with killing intent. He swept his gaze across Su Zimo. Because of that doubt, Su Zimo was someone he had to kill in his heart. Sensing the suspicious gazes around him, Yi Tianqing pretended to be carefree and laughed. Lingro, don't worry. If Minghan can't refine a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon, I'll definitely find one for you in the future and give it to you. I won't go back on my word. All right. Arakatsuki Michinoku nodded. I'm relieved that you can make that promise. The initially doubtful gazes and voices gradually died down. Given Yi Tianqing's reputation, status, I believe that he won't go back on his word since he made such a promise. Perfected Lord Lan Yu surveyed the surroundings and paused her gaze on Su Zimo for a moment before saying slowly, anyone who doubts him will be considered petty. Her tone was heavy and it was clear that she was warning Su Zimo. Su Zimo chuckled as though he could not tell and asked indifferently, since you want to give me a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon, why do you have to wait until the future? Given Yi Tianqing's reputation, status, don't tell me you don't even have a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon? Everyone exclaimed internally. That statement was no less than a divine weapon. It was as though she had returned perfected Lord Lan Yu's words to Yi Tianqing. Furthermore, she had blocked his path of retreat. Everyone knew that Yi Tianqing was the number one of the phenomenon ranking and was known as the number one perfected lord. With a massive faction like Chaos Essence Sect backing him, it was impossible that he did not have a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon. However, having it was one thing and giving it to someone else was another thing. There were many paragons present and they asked themselves honestly, who would be willing to give away a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon as a gift? Yi Tianqing could no longer pretend and his expression darkened completely. Su Zimo smiled gently and asked why? Can't bear to? It was a simple rhetorical question but it made Yi Tianqing so upset that he wanted to vomit blood. He could not answer. If he said that he was willing, he would have to take it out now. If he said that he could not bear to, where would his sincerity lie? Just now's promise was a joke. Yi Tianqing stood up slowly and no longer concealed the killing intent in his heart. He released a massive might and asked coldly, who are you? Everyone could tell that Yi Tianqing was losing control. Actually, Yi Tianqing was not the only one. Even Arakatsuki Michinoku was a little restless. Right now, she really wanted to chase this green-robed cultivator of 100 Refinement Sect out. However, what made her feel terrible was that the green-robed cultivator did not do anything out of line right from the beginning. She could not find a reason at all. Su Zimo ignored Yi Tianqing's threat and turned to Arakatsuki Michinoku. Taking a step back, even if he can take out a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon, what can that prove? Can it prove that he's sincere towards Lingro? Or can it prove that he's magnanimous and has no schemes? Perfected Lord Lan Yu said slowly, at the very least, it can prove Yi Tianqing's sincerity and prove that he's qualified and worthy of being my disciple. Haha. Laughing out loud, Su Zimo slapped his storage bag and pulled out a long sword that shone with a cold glint. Buzz. With a shudder, the sword trembled and released 6 bedazzling lights with a domineering sword chi. 6 Dermic patterns. A Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon. How rare are Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapons? Su Zimo placed the sword on the tea table beside him casually and said indifferently, I can give this sword to Lingro right now. Can that prove my sincerity and prove that I'm qualified as well? The crowd was in an uproar and all of them were excited, waiting to watch the show. What was going on? Someone was trying to snatch the marriage away from Yi Tianqing? Furthermore, this action was a ruthless slap to Yi Tianqing's face. The current situation was getting more delicate. Although little Fatty did not know who the green-robed cultivator was, he was so happy that he could not close his mouth and said hurriedly, brother, you're way too sincere. Some people don't even get to see a single strand of hair after clamoring for so long. Unlike you, you're so straightforward. I'm definitely going to befriend you. Little Fatty gave Su Zimo a thumbs up and did not forget to mock Yi Tianqing. Yi Tianqing stood at the side with a livid expression. His lungs were about to explode. Chapter 938. Who is that person? He's so heroic. Could that person be Fairy Lingro's lover previously and chased after her? He's from 100 Refinement Sect. Why haven't I seen him before? Most of the cultivators present had not seen Suzimo before. Even if they had heard of Mo Ling, they would not be able to match him. While many cultivators were discussing and lamenting, not many people noticed that the cultivators from Sword Sect were glaring fiercely at Suzimo. Their gazes were even sharper than Sword Chi, as though they wanted nothing more than to skin him alive. A sword cultivator standing at the front glared at the sword beside Suzimo and grit his teeth with a menacing expression. Even the veins on his neck were popping. That sword cultivator was none other than the third on the phenomenon ranking, Jian Wuzong. If not for the fact that someone was pulling him back, he would have charged over by now. It turned out that the sword that Suzimo tossed out was the startling dermic sword that he snatched from Jian Wuzong in Wind Cloud City. Now that he had taken it out, he was giving it to Lung Ro. Suzimo was not a sword cultivator to begin with. Furthermore, he had snatched the startling dermic sword casually. He did not feel the pinch at all for giving it away. Little granduncle master, you're truly an ancestor. Nangong Ling wailed internally. Nangong Ling held her forehead and Yu Hanyan turned her face to the side, not daring to meet the eyes of the sword formation cultivators. At that moment they could not wait to pull Suzimo back to the sect. The current situation was chaotic enough. Suzimo had already offended Arakatsuki Michinoku and Yi Tiancheng by speaking up for Lung Ro. Now he'd even offended the sword sect. Nangong Ling wanted to cry but no tears came out as she prayed internally. Little granduncle master, please calm down. Not only did you snatch the sword, you even gave the Khanate dermic weapon you snatched away to someone else. With this new enmity and old enmity added together, Nangong Ling felt that the members of the sword sect were on the verge of losing their patience and charging over. Ru Xian remained silent at the side, feeling a little disappointed. If only little martial granduncle could treat me like this. Ru Xian said in her heart. That's not right. Why are the eyes of all the members of the sword sect red as if they've suffered a great grievance? That sword looks familiar. Startling magic sword. Isn't that Jian Wuzong's startling magic sword? How did it fall into his hands? Don't you know? The startling magic sword has already been snatched away. I think it's a Jining Junjuan from the 100 Refinement sect. His name is Mo Ling. It's him. The one who made a name for himself in Wind Cloud City and crippled Changpeng was also this person. Soon an even noisier wave of voices rose from the crowd. Perfected Lord Panglan of Heavenly Dipper sect crossed his arms and looked at Suzimo with a fake smile. He was the number one of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago. He was older than most of the Jining Zhenjuan present, and was also more mature and experienced. In his opinion, given the current situation, Mo Ling would die without a burial ground even without him making a move. Many cultivators were noisy. Little Fatty and the others did not hear much about Mo Ling or sword cultivators. They were not bothered either. Ji Chengtian was the only one who knew what was going on. However, under Arakatsuki Michinoku's gaze, he did not dare to send a voice transmission or play such tricks. That's enough. Arakatsuki Michinoku took a deep breath and a massive might descended upon the mystic courtyard. The discussions only gradually died down. What's your name? Arakatsuki Michinoku turned around and asked Suzimo in a deep voice. Suzimo stood up and smiled gently, cupping his fists. I'm Mo Ling, a weapon refinement master. When they heard that name, Lung Ro and Little Fatty's hearts skipped a beat. Even Shi Jian froze for a moment. Lung Ro knelt on the ground motionlessly. However, when she heard that name, she turned around for the first time and looked at Suzimo curiously, sizing him up. Compared to Little Fatty and the others as a woman, Lung Ro was more meticulous. She sensed that just now Suzimo's words seemed to be conveying some sort of message. Under normal circumstances, there was no need for Mo Ling to mention that he was a weapon refinement master since he was a disciple of 100 Refinement sect. However, was he trying to remind her of something by mentioning that he was a weapon refinement master? Could it be? Lung Ro thought of a possibility and her heart pounded wildly, almost unable to suppress her emotions. Arakatsuki Michinoku smirked in disdain. Oh, Mo Ling, that's an unfamiliar name. Is it on the phenomenon ranking? Why haven't I heard of it before? Although Arakatsuki Michinoku sounded like he was asking, He was implying that Mo Ling was a nobody. It's fine, Su Zimo grinned. You'll remember it after today. Lung Ro is the disciple I'm most proud of, and is about to be conferred the title of a great talisman master. Arikatsuki Michinoku sneered. Although you gave her a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon, you're not famous at all. To put it bluntly, you're not worthy of Lung Ro at all. Oh. Su Zimo raised his brow slightly and asked instead. Yi Tiancheng is worthy? Fufu. Arikatsuki Michinoku sneered once more. Who is Yi Tiancheng? He's the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking and the number 1 perfected lord. How can you compare to him? A frog in a well. What a joke. A cultivator who hasn't even been on the phenomenon ranking wants to snatch senior brother Ye's bride just because he snatched a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon? That's the light of a firefly trying to compete with the brilliance of the moon. Many cultivators of Chaos Essence sect laughed. Even though Mo Ling had made a name for himself in Wind Cloud City, he was still far from Yi Tiancheng's fame. Suddenly, Su Zimo laughed. Number 1 perfected lord? Su Zimo asked indifferently. Who conferred that title? Ever since Master advanced to the nascent soul realm, he has fought countless battles and has never been defeated. No one doubts his title as the number 1 perfected lord. A maidservant behind Yi Tiancheng stood out and sneered. Oh, Su Zimo smiled. So, it's that simple to be conferred the title of number 1 perfected lord. What a coincidence. Ever since I advanced to the nascent soul realm, I've fought countless battles and have never been defeated as well. In that case, I'm the number 1 perfected lord as well? You, the maidservant was speechless. The next moment, Su Zimo looked at Yi Tiancheng and said something shocking that caused the entire courtyard to fall silent. Have you asked for my opinion before claiming to be the number 1 perfected lord? Puzzled. The cultivators were moved. That simple sentence was filled with a domineering aura that caused one's heart to shudder. It was domineering. Tit for tat. No one expected that someone would dare to challenge Yi Tiancheng head-on before the second part of the Paragon competition of the Thousand Crane Tea Party. For a moment, the cultivators even had the illusion that even Yi Tiancheng was inferior to Mo Ling. Perfected Lord Panglan smiled with a hint of amusement in his eyes. Don't go over. Hang Qiuyu sent a voice transmission to Jian Wuzong. This Mo Ling is very strong. Even with your sword, you're probably not his match. Lung Ro's eyes shone brightly. They were way too similar. In her eyes, Mo Ling seemed to have fused with the person in her memories and could not be distinguished. Lung Ro believed it. Only that person could have this kind of invincible aura that looked down on everything. Chapter 939. Fellow Taoist, may I ask where you're from? Lung Ro looked at Su Zimo, who was not far away, and tried her best to suppress her excitement as she asked softly. North Region. Su Zimo turned around and looked at Lung Ro with a faint smile. When she heard that, Lung Ro no longer had any doubts. Even if his name, identity as a weapon refinement master, and even his origin from the North Region were coincidences, there was something that could not be a coincidence. This person in front of her, when she and they were at their most helpless, stood up and shouldered all the pressure for them. That person was the only one who possessed such boldness. Little Fatty turned to look at Ji Chengtian with an excited expression as well. Ji Chengtian nodded subtly. Sure, Jian was the only one who had yet to figure it out and scratched his head, as though he was conflicted about something. Lung Ro smiled. It was a smile that came from the bottom of her heart. Many cultivators were stunned when they saw the smile on Lung Ro's face. Lung Ro had an indifferent and cold personality. Ever since she appeared, she had not spoken to anyone, let alone smiled as such. If Lung Ro was described as an unapproachable iceberg, then that smile was like a snow lotus blooming on an iceberg, sparkling and translucent, untainted by the mortal world and stunning the world. To think that Fairy Lung Ro would smile at that person. Heavens, my goddess! Could Fairy Lung Ro be moved by a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon? I don't believe it. Fairy Lung Ro must be making use of that person. That person doesn't even know that he's about to die, Fufu. Yi Tiancheng looked at the smile on Lung Ro's face, and the hatred and jealousy in his eyes were intertwined. The killing intent in his heart was almost at its peak. "I'll definitely make that woman suffer a fate worse than death," Yi Tianqing roared in his heart. Feeling Yi Tianqing's anger, the 9 flood dragons that were lying on the ground got up one after another. The steel reins on their bodies rattled. Roar! The 9 ferocious flood dragons were brimming with killing intent. They stared at Su Zimo and let out an earth-shattering roar. The air was turbulent, and sand and stones were sent flying. The cultivators nearby could only feel the ground trembling. It was deafening, and their minds were trembling uncontrollably. It was only when the 9 WRMs were truly enraged that many cultivators realized that the largest WRM in the middle was a mid-level fiend demon. It was equivalent to a void reversion, a pure-blooded vicious beast, and one that was an entire realm higher than Yi Tianqing, was even able to be controlled by Yi Tianqing. How terrifying was Yi Tianqing's true strength? "I'm afraid that Yi Tianqing won't even need to do anything. Just these 9 beasts are enough to sweep everything away." Many cultivators were secretly speechless with horrified expressions. Against the threat of the 9 flood dragons, Su Zimo's expression did not change as he sat on the chair in a relaxed manner. In fact, he even picked up the teacup beside him and lowered his head to drink tea. Without any warning, one of the 9 maidservants beside Yi Tianqing suddenly moved. It was Yi Qi who had just killed someone in the mystic courtyard just now. Yi Qi's gaze was cold as her figure flashed. At an extremely fast speed, she arrived beside Su Zimo in the blink of an eye with a murderous intent. Yi Qi's sleeves trembled gently. A short sword appeared and sliced towards Su Zimo's neck. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. The timing and angle of her attack was perfect. Su Zimo was drinking tea and was distracted. Furthermore, it was difficult for him to sense Yi Qi's approach from his angle. Her assassination methods were not inferior to Hidden Death Sect at all. The crowd was in an uproar. Nobody expected that someone would dare to kill someone in the presence of the 3 Dharma Daojun and the Chiguramon Patriarch. Arikatsuki Michinoku frowned. Others could not react in time. However, given her cultivation, she could naturally suppress the conflict that was about to erupt if she wanted to stop it. However, she chose to remain silent on second thought. She was truly disgusted by this Mo Ling from 100 Refinement Sect. He was completely unknown and wanted to become Dao companions with the disciple she was most proud of with just a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon? What a joke and wishful thinking. In this generation, Chaos Essence Sect's fortune was heaven-defying and 2 paragons appeared out of nowhere, shocking the past and present. If Lung Ro and Yi Tianqing could become Dao companions, Arikatsuki Michinoku believed that it would be a perfect outcome for both the Chiguramon and Lung Ro. If the Chiguramon could obtain the protection of Chaos Essence Sect, it would be normal for it to last for 10,000 years. Right now, chaos was brewing in Tianhuang mainland. If the 4 unorthodox groups did not have the protection of powerful super sects such as the Immortal and Buddhist sects, there was a high chance that they would be destroyed and replaced. The current situation of 100 Refinement Sect was the best example. Arikatsuki Michinoku believed that she had made the right choice. Everything she did was for the sect. However, she had never considered Lung Ro's feelings. Lung Ro was the disciple she was most proud of. Everything had to be controlled by her. She would not allow anything to go wrong. If Yi Qi could cripple Mo Ling cleanly, it would save her a lot of trouble. Naturally, Mo Ling would be reduced to a joke. Perfected Lord Lan Yu was expressionless as she pondered for a moment and did not attack. The situation in the courtyard changed instantly. Under countless shocked gazes, Yi Qi had already arrived before Su Zimo. However, Su Zimo was still seated on the chair with a teacup in his left hand. He was drinking tea with his head lowered, as though he did not notice or react at all. This person is finished. Fufu, the tallest tree in the forest, will be destroyed by the wind. This person doesn't know his limits and is showing off his abilities. He deserves to die here. Since Arikatsuki Michinoku did not attack, it's clear that he has tacitly agreed to this. Yi Qi's eyes shone coldly with a ferocious expression. She knew that Mo Ling was already a dead man. Many cultivators of 100 Refinement Sect were shocked, and their reactions were a step slower. Even Dao Bing Yuding's expression changed starkly, and his pupils constricted. He only had time to shout, "How dare you!" Just as the short sword was about to make contact with Suzimo's neck, Suzimo did not even raise his head. He drank his tea and reached out with his right hand, casually pulling out the startling dermic sword beside him. Buzz! The sword trembled and the startling dermic sword burst forth with a blinding light in Suzimo's hands. In a flash, it collided with the short sword. Cling! Clang! There was a series of metal clashing sounds. Blood flashed. In her vision, Suzimo slashed with his hand and the sword beam created layers of ripples. Instantly, the short sword in her hands was shredded into pieces and shot back. Poof! Poof! Both parties were way too close. The shards of the short sword entered Yiqi's face and her essence spirit was destroyed on the spot. Yiqi charged quickly but retreated even faster. Thump! Seventh Yi fell heavily to the ground. By the time she rolled to Yi Tianqing's feet, she was already a corpse that was mangled beyond recognition. It was only then that Suzimo finished the tea in his hands. Raising his head, he put down his teacup slowly. Dao Bing Yuding had just said the words, "How dare you?" While drinking tea, he killed with a swing of his sword. Everything happened quickly, and it ended even faster. In the blink of an eye, the dust had settled. Yiqi was dead. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.